Hello, friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Deacon Hawthorne, and I've been driving trucks for 23 years. That's long enough to know when a storm is coming before the radio tells you. Long enough to feel the weight shift in your trailer before you see it in the mirror. And long enough to understand that some nights on the road, you're better off not asking questions about what you see. Montana in December doesn't mess around. The cold comes down from Canada like it owns the place, settles into the valleys, and just waits. Waits for you to make a mistake. Waits for your engine to hesitate. Waits for you to think you can push through when you should have stopped 50 miles back. I was hauling construction supplies from Great Falls down to a site near the Idaho border. Nothing complicated, just steel beams, bags of concrete mix, some lumber wrapped tight on 3 pallets. The load wasn't heavy by my standards, maybe 18,000 pounds, well under the limit. The route was the problem. I was taking Highway 200 West, a 2-lane state road that cuts through some of the emptiest country you'll ever see. It's beautiful in summer, all rolling hills and pine forests, but in winter it turns into something else. The trees get heavy with snow and lean over the road like they're trying to close it off. The wind comes sideways across the open stretches and hits your trailer so hard you feel it in your spine. The weather report that morning had been clear enough. Chance of snow, they said. Temperatures dropping to single digits overnight. Wind chill below 0. Standard Montana winter. I'd driven through worse, but by the time I gassed up in Great Falls and started heading west, the sky had changed. It wasn't just gray anymore, it was low and dense, the kind of sky that presses down on you. The sun was still up, but it looked like it was shining through dirty ice. I could smell the snow coming. It's hard to explain if you haven't lived in cold country, but there's a smell to it. Something sharp and metallic in the air, like the whole world is holding its breath. I left Great Falls around 2 in the afternoon. That gave me maybe 4 hours of decent light if I was lucky. The plan was to make it to a truck stop near Missoula before the worst of the storm hit. It was a straight shot, about 200 miles, and if the road stayed clear, I could be there by 7, 8 at the latest. Grab some food, fuel up, maybe catch a few hours of sleep in the cab before pushing on. A simple plan. But plans don't mean much when the weather turns. The first flakes started falling about 20 miles outside of Great Falls. They were light, almost delicate, the kind that melt as soon as they hit the windshield. I turned on the wipers and kept my speed steady. The truck was running smooth, engine warm, tires gripping fine. I had chains in the toolbox if I needed them, but I wasn't worried yet. The road was still visible, the lines still clear. Traffic was light, just a few passenger cars heading the same direction, and one other semi about a mile ahead of me. I could see his taillights blinking red every time he hit a patch of ice. By the time I passed through Lincoln, the snow was coming down harder. Not a blizzard yet, but steady. The flakes were bigger now, wet and heavy, and they were starting to stick to the road. The temperature gauge on my dash read 12 degrees. I clicked on the CB radio and listened for a minute. Static mostly, with a few voices cutting through. Someone talking about road conditions further west. Another driver asking about chain requirements over the pass. I didn't bother chiming in. I just kept driving. The light started to fade around 4. That's the thing about December in Montana. The day just ends. 1 minute you can see, the next minute you're driving through a gray tunnel with your headlights reflecting off a wall of snow. I flipped on my running lights and slowed down to 45. The truck ahead of me had already pulled off, probably deciding to wait it out. I thought about doing the same. But the problem with stopping in a storm is you never know when it's going to let up. You could sit there for an hour, or you could sit there until dawn. I'd rather keep moving, keep the engine warm, keep making miles. The road started to climb. It was a gradual slope at first, nothing steep, but I could feel the trailer pushing against me. The tires were slipping just a little bit on the turns, not enough to lose control, but enough to notice. I downshifted and kept my hands loose on the wheel. Gripping too tight is a mistake. You need to feel the road through the steering. Let the truck tell you what it wants to do. Force it, and you'll end up in a ditch. I passed a highway sign that said Lincoln 15 miles back, Ovando 20 miles ahead. That meant I was right in the middle of nowhere. The Blackfoot River was somewhere off to my right, buried under snow and darkness. To my left was nothing but forest. No houses, no lights, no turnoffs, just the road and the trees and the wind. The snow was blowing sideways now, coming at the windshield in waves. The wipers were working overtime, scraping back and forth, but it wasn't enough. I had to lean forward just to see the lines. That's when I noticed the headlights behind me. They appeared suddenly, maybe a quarter-mile back, 2 yellow beams cutting through the snow. At first I figured it was another truck, someone else deciding to push through. But the lights didn't get any closer. They just stayed there, right on the edge of my mirror, keeping the same distance. I watched them for a few miles, waiting for them to pass or fall back. But they didn't. They just followed. I tried the CB again. Any trucks on Highway 200 heading west, come back. Nothing but static. I tried again. This is a westbound truck just past Lincoln. Anybody out there? Still nothing. The radio crackled and hissed, but no voices came through. I clicked it off and focused on the road. The climb got steeper. I could hear the engine working now, that low growl it makes when it's pulling weight uphill. The trailer swayed a little as the wind hit it broadside. I tapped the brakes gently to keep the speed down and felt the tires bite, then slip, then bite again. Ice under the snow. I was on a ridge now, exposed on both sides, and the wind was stronger up here. It howled past the cab, rattling the mirrors, shaking the whole rig. The snow wasn't falling anymore, it was just flying, coming at me like static on a dead television. The headlights were still back there. I told myself it was nothing. Just another driver, maybe someone from the highway department checking the roads. But something about it didn't sit right. The distance never changed. Not when I sped up, not when I slowed down. It was like whoever was driving back there was measuring their speed exactly to mine, matching me mile for mile. I've been on the road long enough to know that most drivers don't do that. They pass you, or they drop back. They don't just follow. I came around a long curve and saw something up ahead. At first, I thought it was a vehicle stopped on the shoulder, but as I got closer, I realized it was a road sign. One of those big electronic ones the state uses to post warnings. The lights were flashing orange, and the message scrolled across in blocky letters. Winter storm warning. Road conditions deteriorating. Reduce speed. Chains recommended. I was already going slow, but I dropped it down another 5 miles an hour just to be safe. The truck groaned and the engine pitch changed, but we kept moving. Past the sign, the road started to flatten out, and I could see a long, straight stretch ahead of me. No lights, no cars, nothing but white and black and the thin gray ribbon of asphalt cutting through it all. The headlights behind me disappeared. I checked the mirrors, both sides, even craned my neck to look back through the sleeper window. Nothing. Just darkness and snow. Whoever it was must have turned off, maybe pulled over to wait out the storm. I felt a little bit of tension ease out of my shoulders. Better to be alone out here than to have someone riding my tail in conditions like this. I drove another 10 miles without seeing anyone. The snow kept falling, piling up on the shoulders, drifting across the road in thin white ribbons. The wind was relentless, pushing against the side of the trailer, making the whole rig shudder. I could feel the cold seeping in through the door seals, through the vents, even through the floorboards. I cranked the heat up and kept both hands on the wheel. That's when I saw the lights again. They were closer this time, maybe 100 yards back. Same yellow glow, same steady distance, but now I could make out a shape behind them. It wasn't a semi. The lights were too low, too narrow. It looked like a pickup truck, maybe a utility vehicle. The kind the highway department uses for plowing and salting. That made sense. They'd be out checking the roads in weather like this, making sure no one was stranded. I relaxed a little. If it was a state truck, that was actually good news. It meant someone knew I was out here, someone was keeping an eye on the situation. I reached for the CB again, switched to the highway maintenance channel. State vehicle on Highway 200, you guys seeing this storm? Static. I tried again. Highway maintenance. This is a westbound commercial truck about 30 miles east of Ovando. You got someone behind me? Nothing. I switched back to the main channel and tried one more time. Anyone on 200, I've got a vehicle following me. Can't raise them on the radio. Anybody know what's going on? The only answer was the hiss and crackle of empty air. The lights stayed with me. Mile after mile, curve after curve, they kept the same distance. Never closer, never farther. I started to feel uneasy again. That prickle at the back of my neck that tells you something's not right. I've driven through storms before, followed other trucks, been followed by them. It's normal, but this didn't feel normal. There was something deliberate about it, something too precise. I came over a small rise and saw a green highway sign reflecting in my headlights. Ovando 15 miles, that was something at least. Ovando had a gas station, a bar, maybe a place to pull over and wait. 15 miles wasn't far. I could make that. I pressed down on the accelerator just a little, pushing the truck up to 50. The tires whined against the packed snow, and the trailer wobbled. But we held the road. The lights behind me sped up too. I watched them in the mirror, watched them close the gap, just enough to match my speed, then settle back into that same fixed distance. My hands tightened on the wheel. This wasn't random. Whoever was driving that vehicle was doing it on purpose. Following me, pacing me, staying just far enough back that I couldn't see details, but close enough that I knew they were there. I thought about pulling over, just stopping right there on the shoulder, letting them pass, getting a look at them. But something told me that was a bad idea. Out here, in the middle of a storm, with no one else around, you don't stop unless you absolutely have to. You keep moving. You keep your doors locked and your eyes forward, and you trust your instincts. And my instincts were telling me to keep driving. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, shaking the cab so hard that my coffee cup rattled in the holder. The snow was coming down in sheets now, so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. I turned the wipers up to full speed and leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The road was almost invisible, just a faint suggestion of pavement under a blanket of white. I was navigating by feel now, by the gentle tug of the wheel, by the way the tires hummed when they found the center line. The headlights flickered. I glanced in the mirror and saw them dim, then brighten, then dim again. Like someone was tapping the brakes, or like the electrical system was failing. Then they disappeared altogether. I counted to 5, watching the mirror, waiting for them to come back on. They didn't. I exhaled slowly and loosened my grip on the wheel. Maybe the vehicle had turned off. Maybe they'd given up and headed back to town. Maybe I was alone again. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Instead, I felt more exposed, more vulnerable. At least, when I could see the lights, I knew where they were. Now, they could be anywhere. I checked the odometer. 12 miles to Ovando. I could make that. I had to make that. The storm was getting worse, and if I didn't find shelter soon, I was going to end up stuck out here, buried under snow, waiting for morning and hoping the plows would find me before the cold did. The road began to climb again, steeper this time, winding up through a narrow gap in the trees. I downshifted and felt the engine strain. The tires were slipping more now, spinning for a second before they caught. I could smell the brakes, that hot metallic smell that means you're working them too hard. But I didn't have a choice. I had to keep the speed down, had to keep control. Halfway up the hill, the road curved sharply to the right. I took it slow, letting the trailer swing wide, giving myself room. As I came around the curve, my headlights swept across something on the shoulder. Something orange and reflective. I caught just a glimpse of it before it disappeared behind me. A cone, maybe, or a road sign. The kind highway crews put out when they're working. I checked the mirror. Nothing. Just darkness and snow. I kept climbing. The grade was brutal now, the truck groaning with effort, the speedometer dropping to 30, then 25. I was in the lowest gear I could manage without risking a stall. The wind was howling, shaking the cab, making the metal groan and creak. My hands ached from gripping the wheel, and my eyes burned from staring at the wall of white in front of me. And then, finally, the road leveled out. I reached the top of the ridge and felt the trailer settle behind me. The engine relaxed, the pitch dropping back to its normal hum. I allowed myself a breath, deep and slow, and checked the mirrors one more time. The headlights were back. They were closer now, maybe 50 yards. Close enough that I could see they were mounted high, the way they do on state trucks. Close enough that I could see the faint outline of a cab behind them. But there was something wrong about it. The shape was off, too boxy, too old. And the lights themselves were dim, like they were running on a dying battery. I reached for the CB again, my hand shaking just a little. State vehicle behind me on Highway 200, can you hear me? My voice sounded thin, almost swallowed by the static. I'm heading into Ovando. If you're following me, let me know. Just flash your lights or something. Silence. Come on, I muttered. Just give me something. The lights stayed steady. No flash, no flicker. Just that same dim yellow glow cutting through the snow. I forced myself to focus on the road. Ovando was close now, maybe 8 miles. I could see the faint glow of lights ahead, just a smudge of orange against the black. Civilization. Safety. Once I got there, I could pull over, let whoever this was pass, figure out what the hell was going on. But the lights behind me weren't getting any closer. They just hung there, suspended in the storm, watching. I've driven through a lot of bad weather in my life. I've been in whiteouts where you can't see your own hood. In ice storms where the road turns into a skating rink. In winds strong enough to flip an empty trailer. But I've never felt anything like this. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something deeper, something older. A sense that I was being measured, weighed, followed not by a person but by something patient and deliberate. The lights of Ovando grew brighter. I could make out individual buildings now, a gas station on the left, a small diner on the right. There were a few cars parked in front of the diner, their roofs piled with snow. I slowed down, signaling even though there was no one to see it, and started to ease onto the shoulder. In the mirror, the headlights behind me began to fade, not like someone turning them off, but like they were backing away, retreating into the storm. I watched them shrink, watched them dissolve into the swirling snow, until there was nothing left but darkness. I sat there on the shoulder for a long moment, engine idling, heater blasting, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I pulled back onto the road and kept driving. I didn't stop in Ovando. I didn't stop until I was 30 miles past it, at a brightly lit truck stop with a dozen other rigs parked out front and people moving around under the fluorescent lights. Even then, I checked the mirrors before I opened the door. And I kept checking them all night long. The truck stop outside of Sealy Lake was one of those places that felt like a small island of light in an ocean of darkness. 12 rigs lined up in neat rows, their running lights glowing amber and red, diesel engines rumbling in that low, steady rhythm that sounds almost like breathing. I parked at the far end, backing in so I had a clear view of the entrance. Old habit, you always want to see who's coming. I killed the engine and sat there for a minute, letting my hands uncurl from the wheel. My fingers ached, my shoulders ached, my jaw ached from clenching it for the past hour. Through the windshield I could see the main building, a low, concrete structure with big windows lit up bright. Inside, a handful of drivers moved around, getting coffee, buying snacks, standing in line for the showers. Normal things. Safe things. I grabbed my jacket from behind the seat and climbed down from the cab. The cold hit me like a fist. It wasn't just cold, it was sharp. The kind of cold that goes right through your clothes and settles into your bones. My breath came out in thick, white clouds. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind was still blowing, pushing drifts across the parking lot, making little spirals of white dance under the lights. I did a quick walk around the truck, checking the straps on the load, looking at the tires. Everything looked fine. No damage, no problems. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That vehicle behind me on the highway, the way it had followed me for miles and then just vanished. It didn't sit right. I've been followed before, plenty of times. Other trucks drafting behind me to save fuel, passenger cars stuck behind me on a 2-lane road. But this was different. This felt intentional. Inside the truck stop, the heat was almost overwhelming after the cold. The air smelled like coffee and fried food, and diesel fuel tracked in on boots. I nodded to a couple of drivers I recognized, grabbed a cup of coffee from the self-serve station, and found a spot by the window where I could watch the parking lot. The coffee was terrible, bitter and burnt, but it was hot, and that was all that mattered. I pulled out my phone and checked the weather. The forecast hadn't improved. Winter storm warning in effect until 6 a.m. Heavy snow expected, winds gusting up to 40 miles per hour, wind chill well below zero. Travel not recommended. I scrolled through the map, looking at road conditions. Highway 200 was listed as hazardous, chain requirements in effect. Several smaller roads were already closed. I was lucky I'd made it this far. A driver at the next table was talking to someone on his phone, his voice loud enough to carry. "Yeah, I'm stuck here for the night. No way I'm driving in this. They closed the pass about an hour ago. Some idiot tried to push through and ended up in a ditch." He laughed, but it was a tired sound. State patrols out there pulling people out left and right. I sipped my coffee and stared out the window. The parking lot was still, just the wind moving across it, pushing snow into patterns that shifted and changed. I thought about calling it a night, climbing into the sleeper and trying to get some rest. But I wasn't tired. Not in the way that leads to sleep, anyway. I was wired, anxious, my mind turning over the events of the past few hours. After about 20 minutes, I tossed the empty cup in the trash and headed back out to the truck. The cold was worse now, if that was possible. I could feel the moisture in my nose freezing, could feel the wind cutting through my jacket. I climbed back into the cab and fired up the engine, letting it warm up while I checked the load one more time in the mirrors. The plan was simple. Get some sleep, wait for the storm to pass, then head out at first light. But as I sat there, engine idling, heater blasting, I couldn't shake the urge to keep moving. Something about stopping felt wrong. Like if I stayed here too long, something would catch up to me. I pulled out of the truck stop around 9 p.m. I knew it was a risk, knew I should wait, but I've learned to trust my gut over the years. And my gut was telling me to move. The highway was worse than before. The snow had started falling again, lighter this time, but steady. The road was covered in a thick layer of slush and ice, and I could feel the tires slipping every time I touched the brakes. I kept my speed down to 35 and stayed in the right lane, trying to follow the tire tracks left by the plow trucks. The tracks were already filling in with fresh snow. Traffic was almost non-existent. I passed one car going the other direction, headlights barely visible through the storm. A few minutes later, I saw tail lights up ahead, another semi crawling along at about the same speed I was. I kept my distance, not wanting to crowd him, and just focused on keeping the truck on the road. The storm seemed to come in waves. 1 minute, the visibility would improve and I could see 100 yards ahead. The next minute, the snow would come down so thick I could barely see the hood. The wind was constant, buffeting the trailer, making the whole rig sway. I could hear the metal creaking, could feel the suspension working overtime. I'd been driving for about 40 minutes when I saw the road sign. Clearwater Junction, 8 miles. I remembered that intersection. It was a major crossroads with a gas station and a small motel. If the weather got worse, that would be my fallback. A place to pull over and wait it out. But as I got closer to the junction, I started to see orange cones on the shoulder. They appeared one by one in my headlights, spaced about 50 feet apart, their reflective stripes glowing bright. Then I saw the flashing lights, amber and white, mounted on top of a vehicle parked sideways across the right lane. I slowed down, downshifting, and brought the truck to a stop about 20 yards away. Through the falling snow, I could make out the shape of a pickup truck. It was white, with a yellow light bar on the roof and a plow blade mounted on the front. State Highway Department. The driver's door was open, and someone was standing next to it waving a flashlight. I rolled down my window, letting in a blast of freezing air. The person with the flashlight walked toward me, boots crunching in the snow. As he got closer, I could see he was wearing an orange vest over a heavy coat and a yellow hard hat. His face was red from the cold, his breath coming out in thick clouds. "Road's closed up ahead," he shouted over the wind. "Big pileup at the junction. You need to turn around or wait it out here." I leaned out of the window. How long's it going to be closed? Could be all night. They got 3 cars and a semi tangled up. Nobody hurt bad, but it's a mess. Tow trucks are on the way, but in this weather... He shrugged. I nodded. "All right, I'll head back to Seeley Lake." "That's your best bet. They got a truck stop there. You can hole up till morning." He paused, then added, "Be careful out there. Visibility's going downhill fast." "Appreciate it," I said, and started to roll up the window. "Hey," the man called out. "You see any other vehicles on your way here?" I hesitated. "Like what?" "State truck, white pickup, similar to this one. My supervisor said he was heading this way about an hour ago, but I haven't seen him." I thought about the headlights that had followed me earlier, the way they'd stayed just far enough back, the way they'd disappeared when I pulled over. "Maybe," I said. "I had someone following me for a while on 200, but I couldn't tell what kind of vehicle it was. Lost sight of them before Ovando." The man frowned. "That's Rhett. He does that sometimes, follows trucks to make sure they're handling the roads okay, but he usually checks in on the radio." He pulled a walkie-talkie from his belt and thumbed the button. "Rhett, you out there? Come back." Static. He tried again. "Rhett Barlow, this is Jensen at Clearwater Junction. You copy?" Nothing but the hiss of empty air. The man, Jensen, shook his head and clipped the radio back to his belt. "Radio's been spotty all night. He's probably fine, just lost signal." But he didn't sound convinced. "You want me to keep an eye out on my way back?" I asked. "Yeah, if you don't mind." If you see a white state truck with a plow, flash your lights or something. Let him know I'm looking for him." "Will do." Jensen stepped back and waved me through. I eased the truck into a wide turn, using the full width of the road to swing the trailer around. It took a couple of tries backing up and adjusting, but eventually I got pointed back the way I'd come. As I pulled away, I checked the mirror and saw Jensen standing there in the snow, staring down the empty road, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The drive back felt longer than the drive out. Maybe it was because I was tired, or maybe it was because I knew I was backtracking, giving up miles I'd already earned. The storm seemed to sense my frustration and got worse. The snow came down harder, the wind picked up, and the temperature dropped another few degrees. I could feel the cold seeping through the door seals, through the floorboards, even through the dashboard. I was about halfway back to Seeley Lake when I saw the headlights again. They appeared suddenly in my mirror, maybe a quarter-mile back. 2 yellow beams, mounted high, cutting through the snow. My first thought was that it was Jensen, coming to tell me the road had reopened. But Jensen had been parked sideways across the lane, and these lights were coming from the direction of the junction, from the closed section of highway. I watched them for a minute, waiting for them to get closer or fall back. They did neither. They just stayed there, the same distance, the same steady pace, following me. I reached for the CB. "State vehicle behind me on Highway 200, that you, Jensen?" Static. "This is the westbound truck you just turned around at Clearwater. Got someone behind me, that you?" Nothing. I tried the emergency channel. "Highway maintenance. I've got a vehicle following me on 200, can't raise them on the radio. Anyone copy?" The only answer was the crackle of interference. I told myself it was Rhett. Jensen's supervisor, the one who'd been out checking the roads. Maybe he'd been further west, hadn't heard Jensen calling on the radio. Maybe he was heading back now, following me just to make sure I made it back to the truck stop safely. That made sense, that was logical. But the lights didn't get any closer. They just hung there, suspended in the storm, keeping that same fixed distance. And something about them felt familiar. Not just familiar, identical. The same spacing, the same dim yellow glow, the same unwavering presence. I pressed down on the accelerator, pushing the truck up to 45. The tires whined and the trailer swayed, but we held the road. In the mirror, the lights sped up too, closing the gap just enough to match my speed, then settling back. My hands tightened on the wheel. This was the same vehicle, the same one that had followed me before. I was sure of it now, but that didn't make sense. I'd lost those lights miles back, before I even reached Ovando, and Jensen had said Rhett was missing, that he hadn't checked in. So who the hell was behind me? The trees closed in on both sides, tall pines heavy with snow, their branches reaching over the road like they were trying to grab the truck. The wind howled through them, making a sound like voices, like whispers just below the threshold of hearing. I could feel my heart pounding, could feel the adrenaline sharpening my senses. Every shadow looked like movement. Every drift looked like something crouching. I came around a long curve and saw something up ahead. At first I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer I realized it was a vehicle. It was parked on the shoulder, nose pointed toward the ditch, tail end sticking out into the lane. A white pickup truck with a plow blade on the front. I slowed down, my foot hovering over the brake. The truck was dark, no lights, no sign of anyone inside. As I passed it, I got a good look. It was a state highway truck, just like the one Jensen had been driving. The door was closed, the windows were covered in snow, and there were no tracks leading away from it. Like it had been sitting there for hours. In the mirror, the headlights behind me were gone. I checked both sides, craned my neck to look back through the sleeper window. Nothing. Just the empty road and the falling snow. The state truck sat there on the shoulder, dark and silent, and then it was behind me, swallowed by the storm. I drove for another 10 minutes, my mind racing. That truck on the shoulder, was that Rhett's? It had to be, but if it was, then who had been following me? And where had they gone? I tried the CB again. Jensen, at Clearwater Junction, you copy? I found a state truck on the shoulder about 6 miles east of your position. Looks like it's been there a while. Static, then a voice, faint and broken. Copy? Say again. I found the truck, I repeated, louder this time. White pickup with a plow parked on the shoulder, no sign of the driver. Which mile marker? I don't know. I didn't see one. About 6 miles east of the junction, right after a big curve. Check. The radio went dead. I tried again, but there was no response. The signal was gone, swallowed by the storm. I kept driving. The lights of Seeley Lake appeared ahead, faint at first, then brighter. I'd never been so glad to see a truck stop in my life. I pulled in, parked in the same spot as before, and killed the engine. My hands were shaking. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the dashboard, trying to process what had just happened. Finally, I climbed down from the cab and went inside. The place was quieter now, just a few drivers scattered around, most of them asleep in their trucks. I bought another cup of coffee and sat down by the window, watching the parking lot. Waiting. About an hour later, I saw lights on the highway. 2 vehicles moving slowly. As they got closer, I recognized the flashing amber lights of state trucks. They pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the entrance. 3 men climbed out, all wearing orange vests and hard hats. One of them was Jensen. I walked outside and met them halfway. Jensen recognized me and nodded. You're the driver who called it in? Yeah? Did you find him? Jensen's face was grim. We found the truck, no sign of Rhett. What do you mean, no sign? Truck was empty. Keys still in the ignition. Radio on. No tracks leading away. No blood. Nothing. Like he just vanished. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. How long has the truck been there? One of the other men spoke up. That's the thing. We checked the GPS logs. That truck hasn't moved in 2 days, and it shouldn't even be on the road. What do you mean? Jensen glanced at his colleague, then back at me. Rhett Barlow's been on medical leave for 3 weeks. Hurt his back. He's not cleared to drive. And the truck you found? That truck was decommissioned 6 months ago. Sold for parts. It's not even in our fleet anymore. I stared at him. That's impossible. I saw it. It was right there on the shoulder. We know, Jensen said quietly. We saw it too. Same truck, same plate numbers. But according to every record we have, that vehicle doesn't exist. Nobody spoke for a moment. The wind blew across the parking lot, pushing snow into drifts, and somewhere in the distance a semi's air horn sounded, long and low. Jensen cleared his throat. Look, we're going to file a report. If you remember anything else, any details, give us a call. He handed me a card with the highway department's number on it. And be careful out there. This storm's bringing out all kinds of weird stuff. I took the card and nodded, but I didn't say what I was thinking. That the truck hadn't been weird. It had been normal, solid, real. It was everything else that felt wrong. The lights that followed me. The way the vehicle had appeared and disappeared. The way it had matched my speed exactly, mile after mile, like it was tethered to me. I went back inside and sat by the window for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep. I just watched the parking lot, watched the highway, watched the snowfall. And I kept thinking about what Jensen had said. The truck was decommissioned, sold for parts. Shouldn't exist. But I'd seen it. I'd seen the headlights behind me, had watched them follow me through the storm, and when I'd passed that white pickup on the shoulder, I'd seen something else too, something I hadn't mentioned to Jensen. In the split second when my headlights had swept across the cab, I'd seen a shape inside. A dark silhouette behind the wheel, sitting perfectly still, hands on the dashboard, head turned toward me, watching. At dawn, the storm finally broke. The snow stopped falling and the wind died down, leaving everything buried under a thick white blanket. I started the truck and let it warm up, scraping ice off the windshield, checking the straps one more time. Other drivers were doing the same, getting ready to roll. Life going back to normal. I pulled out of the truck stop and headed west, following Highway 200 toward the Idaho border. The road was still icy, but the plows had been through and left a passable lane. I kept my speed down and my eyes forward, trying not to think about the night before. But every time I checked the mirrors, I half expected to see those yellow lights again, hanging there in the distance, following. They never appeared. The road stayed empty behind me, and by the time I reached the Idaho line, the sun was up and the world looked normal again. Just snow and trees and a long ribbon of highway stretching west. I made my delivery, unloaded the construction supplies, and signed the paperwork. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that I'd crossed a line somewhere back on that frozen Montana highway, and now I was on the other side of it. I called the highway department 3 times over the next week, asking if they'd found Rhett Barlow. Each time, they told me the same thing. No sign of him. Search called off. Case still open, but no leads. And each time I wanted to ask them about the truck. About how a vehicle that shouldn't exist had been sitting on the shoulder, dark and silent, with someone inside, but I never did. Because I already knew what they'd say. That I was tired. That it was dark. That storms play tricks on your mind. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country, I check the mirrors just a little more often, just to make sure nothing's following me. Nothing that shouldn't be there. Nothing that's been gone for months but somehow still remembers the roads. 3 weeks passed before I had another load that took me through Montana. In those 3 weeks I tried not to think about that night on Highway 200, about the headlights that followed me, about the state truck that shouldn't have existed. I took runs through Wyoming and Idaho, down into Nevada, even made a trip up to North Dakota. But I avoided Montana. Told my dispatcher I needed a break from that route, that I wanted to try something different. He didn't ask questions. After 23 years, I'd earned the right to pick my loads. But eventually, the money was too good to pass up. A rush delivery of medical equipment from Great Falls to Missoula, premium rate, time sensitive. The kind of job you don't turn down. And it was a straight shot on I-90 this time, not the back roads. Major highway, plenty of traffic, well maintained. Nothing like Highway 200. I told myself it would be fine. The weather was better this time. Clear skies, temperatures in the 20s, roads dry and salted. I left Great Falls in the afternoon with plenty of daylight ahead of me. The load was light, just 3 pallets of medical supplies, carefully strapped and secured. The truck ran smooth, engine purring, tires gripping clean pavement. It should have been an easy run. I made good time through Helena, barely hit any traffic. By the time I reached the turnoff for Garrison, the sun was starting to set, painting the mountains orange and purple. I'd forgotten how beautiful Montana could be when it wasn't trying to kill you. The trees were still heavy with snow, but it looked picturesque now, like something from a postcard. The air was crisp and still, no wind at all. I stopped for fuel at a truck stop outside of Drummond. It was one of those big modern places, bright and clean, with a restaurant and a shower facility. I topped off the tank, grabbed a sandwich and a coffee, used the restroom. Standard routine. Inside, there were maybe a dozen other drivers scattered around, some eating, some on their phones, some just staring into space with that 1,000-yard stare you get after too many hours on the road. I was paying for my coffee when I heard someone mention Rhett Barlow's name. 2 drivers were sitting at a table near the window, both older guys, probably in their 50s. One of them was reading something on his phone, shaking his head. Says here they called off the search. Been almost a month now, no trace of him. The other driver grunted. Probably fell in a ravine somewhere. Happens every winter. Guys go out in a storm, lose their bearings, end up at the bottom of a cliff. They'll find him come spring when the snow melts. Maybe, but it's weird, right? His truck just sitting there on the shoulder, keys in the ignition, radio on. Like he stepped out for a minute and never came back. This is Montana. Weird is just another word for Tuesday. They both laughed, but it was an uneasy sound. I paid for my coffee and headed back to the truck without saying anything. But as I climbed into the cab, I couldn't help thinking about what they'd said. No trace. Almost a month. And that truck sitting there empty, like someone had just vanished mid-shift. I pulled back onto I-90 and continued west. The sun was below the horizon now, and the sky was fading from purple to black. My headlights cut through the gathering darkness, and the road stretched out ahead of me, straight and empty. I turned on the radio, found a classic rock station, and tried to relax. Just another 100 miles to Missoula. I'd be there by 9, maybe 9:30. Drop the load at the warehouse, grab a motel room, sleep in a real bed for a change. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. It's hard to explain. There was nothing wrong, nothing out of place. The truck was running fine, the road was clear, traffic was normal. But I kept checking the mirrors, kept glancing at the CB radio, kept waiting for something to happen. It was like that feeling you get when you walk into your house and sense that someone's been there, even though nothing's been moved or taken. Just an instinctive knowing that something's off. I tried the CB just to break the silence. Westbound on I-90 near Drummond. Anybody out there? A voice crackled back immediately. Eastbound about 10 miles ahead of you. How's the road looking? Clear and dry. Good driving. Copy that. Stay safe out there. The exchange helped. Real voices. Real people. I wasn't alone. I kept the CB on and listened to the chatter. Drivers talking about weather, traffic, places to eat. Normal conversation. It should have been comforting, but somehow it made the silence between transmissions feel heavier. About 20 miles east of Missoula, the highway cut through a narrow valley with steep hills on both sides. The trees pressed in close to the road, and the darkness between them was absolute. No houses, no lights, just forest. I downshifted and kept my speed steady, letting the truck find its rhythm. That's when I saw the sign. It was one of those historical markers the state puts up, brown with white lettering. It stood on the shoulder, illuminated by my headlights as I passed. I only caught a glimpse, but the words stuck in my head. Rhett's Crossing, named for early settler Rhett Barlow, who established a ferry service here in 1883. I felt my stomach drop. Rhett Barlow. The same name. It had to be a coincidence. Had to be. Barlow wasn't an uncommon name in Montana. Probably dozens of families with that surname scattered across the state. But the timing of it, seeing that sign now, after hearing about the missing highway worker, after what I'd experienced 3 weeks ago, it felt like more than coincidence. I tried to push it out of my mind. Focused on the road, on the yellow lines, on the rhythm of the tires. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Rhett Barlow, 1883. Rhett Barlow, missing in 2024. The same stretch of highway, The same mountains, the same cold. Separated by more than a century, but somehow connected. The CB crackled. Anybody near Tura? I thumbed the mic. This is westbound, about 15 miles out. What's going on? Just checking. Thought I saw something weird on the shoulder back there. Probably nothing. What kind of weird? There was a pause, then the voice came back, quieter this time. Looked like a truck. White pickup with a plow on the front. But when I slowed down to check it out, it was gone. Must have been shadows or something. I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. What mile marker? Around 102, I think. Right after the Tura exit. Thanks for the heads up. Yeah, stay safe. I checked the mile markers as I drove. 98, 99, 100. My heart was pounding now, my mouth dry. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Just because someone saw a white truck didn't mean it was the same one. Didn't mean anything at all. But I couldn't help looking at the shoulder as I approached mile 102, scanning the darkness for any sign of reflective paint or metal. There was nothing there. Just snow and trees and empty pavement. I exhaled slowly and loosened my grip on the wheel. See? Nothing. Just drivers seeing things in the dark, brains filling in patterns where there weren't any. I was letting my imagination run wild, turning normal events into something sinister. But then I saw the headlights. They appeared in my mirror, maybe a half-mile back. 2 yellow beams, mounted high, cutting through the darkness. Just like before. I watched them for a minute, waiting to see what they'd do. They didn't get closer. They didn't fall back. They just stayed there, keeping pace. I tried the CB. Vehicle behind me on westbound I-90 near Tura. You trying to pass? No answer. I tried again. White pickup behind me. You need to get around? Static. My hands were shaking now. I checked the speedometer. 65. I dropped it to 60, then 55. In the mirror, the lights slowed too, maintaining that same fixed distance. I sped back up to 70. The lights matched me. This was happening again. 3 weeks later, different road, different conditions, but the same vehicle, the same presence. Following me. I grabbed my phone and called 911. It rang twice before a dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? I'm a commercial truck driver on I-90 westbound near mile 102. There's a vehicle following me and I can't shake them. They're not responding on CB radio. Can you describe the vehicle? White pickup truck with high-mounted headlights. Looks like it might be a highway department truck with a plow. There was a pause. Sir, are you in danger? Is the vehicle threatening you? No, it's just... They're following me, keeping the same distance no matter what I do. Okay, I'm going to have a state trooper check it out. Can you pull over somewhere safe? There's a rest area coming up in a few miles. I can stop there. Do that. Stay in your vehicle with the doors locked. An officer will be there shortly. I kept the phone on speaker and set it in the cup holder. The rest area sign appeared in my headlights. Silverwood Rest Area, 2 miles. I signaled even though there was no one to see it, just habit, and started to ease onto the exit ramp. In the mirror, the headlights turned off. Not like someone hitting the switch, like they'd never been there at all. 1 second they were there, solid and real, and the next second they were gone. I checked all 3 mirrors, craned my neck to look behind me. Nothing. Just the empty highway in the darkness. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Sir, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. The vehicle's gone. Just disappeared. Disappeared? Turned off their lights or pulled off or something. I don't see them anymore. Do you still want an officer to meet you? I thought about it. What would I tell them? That a truck was following me and then vanished? that I thought it might be the same truck that had been decommissioned 6 months ago. They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. "No," I said. "I think I'm okay. Must have been someone messing with me. If you're sure, you can call back if the situation changes. Thanks." I hung up and sat there on the shoulder for a moment. Engine idling, hazard lights flashing. The rest area was just ahead, a small paved lot with restrooms and a couple of picnic tables buried under snow. It looked empty. I could pull in, take a break, try to calm down. Or I could keep driving, push through to Missoula, deliver the load, and get the hell out of Montana. I chose the second option. Back on the highway, I kept my speed at 70 and my eyes on the road. Every few seconds, I checked the mirrors, but there was nothing there. Just my own trailer, just the normal scatter of taillights from other vehicles miles ahead. The closer I got to Missoula, the more traffic I saw. Cars, trucks, normal people going about their normal lives. It helped, made me feel less isolated. I delivered the load at 9:45 p.m., backed into the loading dock, watched the warehouse guys unstrap the pallets and wheel them inside. Standard procedure. They had me sign some paperwork, asked if I needed fuel or directions. I said no, I was fine, and got out of there as fast as I could. There was a motel near the warehouse. One of those budget chains with a blinking neon sign and parking lot full of road-worn vehicles. I checked in, paid cash, and parked the truck where I could see it from my room window. The room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 beds with thin blankets, a TV bolted to the wall, a bathroom that smelled like bleach. But it was warm, and it had a lock on the door, and that was all I needed. I should have slept, but I couldn't. I sat on the bed with my boots still on, staring at the window, watching the parking lot. Every time headlights swept across the curtain, I tensed up, waiting to see if they'd stop. But they always kept moving, always belonged to someone else. Around midnight, I turned on the TV just for the noise, found a news channel, local coverage. They were talking about the weather, about road conditions, about the usual stuff. Then the anchor said something that made me sit up. State highway officials are still searching for Rhett Barlow, a maintenance worker who went missing nearly 4 weeks ago during a winter storm. Barlow, 42, was last seen on Highway 200 near Clearwater Junction. His vehicle was found abandoned on the shoulder, but there's been no sign of Barlow himself. Anyone with information is asked to contact. I turned it off. 42 years old. That detail hit me harder than it should have. Rhett Barlow wasn't just a name anymore. He was a real person. Probably had a family, kids, people waiting for him to come home. And he'd vanished out there in the cold while I'd been driving past, while that ghost truck or whatever it was had been following me. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The heater clicked and hummed, cycling on and off. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic on I-90, that constant low rumble that never really stops. I thought about what those drivers in Drummond had said. They'll find him come spring when the snow melts. But what if they didn't? What if Rhett Barlow had become part of the road itself? Part of the history that stretched back to 1883, to his ancestor who'd run the ferry crossing. I must have dozed off at some point because I woke up to sunlight streaming through a gap in the curtains. It was 7:30 a.m. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My body ached, my head throbbed, and my mouth tasted like old coffee. But at least it was morning. Daylight made everything feel more manageable. I checked out of the motel and headed to a diner down the street. Sat at the counter, ordered eggs and bacon and toast, drank 3 cups of coffee. The waitress was friendly, chatty, asked where I was headed. I told her back to Wyoming. She said the roads were clear, should be good driving. I thanked her and left a decent tip. Back in the truck, I pulled up my dispatch app to see what loads were available. There were a couple heading east, back toward Billings and beyond. I picked one, confirmed it, and started plotting my route. I'd swing up to Helena, then cut across to Bozeman. Stay on the main highways, avoid the back roads. No more Highway 200. No more dark valleys and empty stretches. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I made a decision. There was something I needed to do first. I drove back to the warehouse where I'd dropped the medical supplies. The office was open, a small building attached to the loading dock. Inside, a woman sat at a desk surrounded by filing cabinets and clipboards. She looked up when I walked in. "Help you?" "I delivered a load here last night. Medical supplies from Great Falls. I was wondering if you guys keep records of delivery times, like when trucks come through." She frowned. "We do, but that's usually for our internal tracking. Why?" "I'm trying to figure out if I've driven this route before. I think I might have, but my logs from a few months back got mixed up." It was a weak excuse, but she didn't seem to care. She turned to her computer and clicked through a few screens. "What's your truck number?" I gave it to her. She typed, scrolled, typed some more. "Shows here you delivered at 9:47 p.m. yesterday. Before that," she scrolled back. "Nothing. This is your first delivery to this location. What about other drivers? Anyone else coming from Great Falls in the past few weeks?" "Sure, we get trucks from Great Falls all the time. Why?" "Did any of them report seeing anything unusual on the drive? Maybe a vehicle following them or weird lights?" Now she looked at me like I was crazy. Unusual how? I realized how this sounded. "Never mind. Thanks for checking." I left before she could ask more questions. Back in the truck, I sat with the engine idling, trying to decide what to do next. I could just leave, head east, take my next load, forget all of this. That's what a smart person would do. But something was nagging at me, something I couldn't quite name. I pulled out the card Jensen had given me that night at the truck stop. Highway Department, Emergency Maintenance Division. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Maintenance, this is Carter." "Hi, my name's Deacon Hawthorne. I'm a truck driver. I talked to one of your guys a few weeks back, Jensen, about a missing worker named Rhett Barlow." "Yeah, I know about that situation. What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if there's been any update." "Have you found him?" "No. Search was called off last week. If he's out there, we'll find him when the snow melts. Happens sometimes." "What about his truck? The one I saw on the shoulder?" There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "The white pickup with the plow. The one that was decommissioned." Another pause. Longer this time. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have any record of you reporting a vehicle." "But I did. I talked to Jensen. He came to the truck stop in Seeley Lake. He told me the truck had been decommissioned, that it shouldn't have been on the road." "Hold on." I heard paper rustling, keyboard clicking. "I'm looking at the incident report from that night. Says you reported headlights following you and that you saw what you thought was a state vehicle on the shoulder, but there's no mention of us finding anything." "That's not possible. Jensen told me he found the truck. He said it was Rhett's truck, but it had been sold for parts." "Sir, we never found a truck. We checked that section of Highway 200 3 times. Nothing there." I felt cold all over. Then what did I see? I don't know. Maybe shadows, maybe another vehicle. But it wasn't one of ours. Look, I appreciate you trying to help, but the case is closed. If anything new turns up, we'll follow up. But right now, there's nothing more we can do." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. They never found the truck. Never found any trace of it. Which meant either I'd hallucinated the whole thing, or something else was going on. Something that didn't follow the normal rules. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. I needed to leave Missoula, needed to get back on familiar roads. But as I drove through town, heading toward the on-ramp for I-90 East, I saw something that made me hit the brakes. A historical marker. Just like the one I'd seen the night before. Brown with white lettering, standing on the corner of a street. I pulled over and got out, leaving the truck idling. The marker read, "In memory of Rhett Barlow, 1841 to 1883. Pioneer settler and ferryman. Lost in a blizzard while attempting to rescue stranded travelers. His service to the community and dedication to helping others is remembered." Lost in a blizzard, attempting to rescue travelers. I read it twice, 3 times, trying to make sense of it. The man from 1883 had died in a storm, trying to help people. And now, more than a century later, another Rhett Barlow had vanished in a storm, while supposedly checking on drivers. It couldn't be a coincidence. There had to be a connection. Something I was missing, but what? I stood there for a long time, reading that marker over and over, while the cold wind blew and the traffic moved past and the sun climbed higher in the sky. And I realized something. Whatever was following me on those roads, whatever had been in that white truck, it wasn't trying to hurt me. It was just following, checking, making sure I was okay, like someone still doing their job long after they were supposed to stop. I climbed back into the truck and sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the road ahead. I thought about turning around, going back to Highway 200, trying to find that spot where I'd seen the truck. But what would be the point? I already knew what I'd find. Nothing. Just snow and trees and empty pavement. Instead, I put the truck in gear and headed east, away from Montana, away from the mountains, away from whatever it was that lived in those frozen valleys. I had another load waiting, another delivery to make. The road was calling the way it always does. But I knew I'd be back. Montana had a way of pulling you in, whether you wanted it or not. And next time, maybe I'd be ready. Maybe I'd understand what I was seeing. Or maybe I'd just keep driving, keep moving, keep my eyes forward and my hands on the wheel. That's what truckers do. We drive. We don't ask questions. We don't look too closely at the things that follow us in the dark. We just keep rolling, mile after mile, until the road runs out or the fuel runs dry, whichever comes first. Winter came back hard in late February. I'd managed to avoid Montana for almost 2 months, taking loads through Colorado and Utah, even made a run all the way down to Arizona just to stay away from the northern routes. But the money dried up down south, and my dispatcher started asking questions. Why was I turning down good loads? Was something wrong with the truck? Did I need time off? I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't say that I was avoiding an entire state because of headlights that followed me in the dark, because of a truck that shouldn't exist, because of a name that connected 2 men across more than a century. He would have thought I'd lost it. Maybe I had. But then he called with an offer I couldn't refuse. Double rate, hazard pay, immediate pickup. A load of emergency heating equipment from Billings to Kalispell. The western part of Montana was getting hammered by a late-season storm. Temperatures dropping to 20 below, wind chills off the charts. People were freezing. They needed these heaters, and they needed them fast. Only catch was the route. Highway 200 straight across the middle of the state through all that empty country I'd been avoiding. I said yes, not because I wanted to, but because sometimes you run out of choices. Sometimes the road decides where you're going, and all you can do is grip the wheel and follow. I picked up the load in Billings on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was already that familiar gray, that heavy pressing color that means snow. The forecast was calling for 6 to 8 inches overnight, winds gusting to 40 miles per hour, travel not advised. But the heaters were needed now, not tomorrow, not next week. So I signed the paperwork, did my inspection, and headed west. The first 100 miles were fine, cold but clear, roads dry. I made good time through Big Timber and Livingston, caught the sunset over the crazy mountains. It was beautiful, all orange and pink against the snow-covered peaks. For a moment I almost forgot why I'd been avoiding this place. Almost remembered why I'd fallen in love with trucking all those years ago. But as I got closer to White Sulphur Springs, the sky changed. The color drained out of it, leaving nothing but gray and black. The wind picked up, rocking the trailer, making the whole rig sway. And the snow started. Light at first, just flurries dancing across the windshield. Then heavier, coming down in thick wet flakes that stuck to everything. I pulled over at a rest area to check the straps and make sure everything was secure. The heaters were heavy, packed tight on pallets, but I didn't want anything shifting in bad weather. While I was outside, I noticed something. There were no other vehicles in the rest area. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just my rig and the empty parking lot and the snow falling silent and steady. The cold bit into me through my jacket. My breath came out in white clouds that the wind tore apart. I finished checking the load and climbed back into the cab, starting the engine, cranking the heat up as high as it would go. My fingers were numb, my face red and stinging. I pulled back onto the highway and continued west. The snow was really coming down now, visibility dropping fast. I flipped on my fog lights and slowed to 45. The road was getting slick. That dangerous kind of slick where you can't tell if it's wet or icy until you hit it wrong. I kept the truck in a lower gear and let the engine help with the braking. Traffic was light. I passed a few passenger cars heading east, their drivers probably smart enough to be running from the storm instead of into it. Once in a while, another semi would appear in my mirrors or my headlights, but they'd peel off at exits, looking for places to hole up and wait it out. By the time I got to White Sulphur Springs, I was alone on the road. I should have stopped there. Should have found a truck stop or a motel, called my dispatcher, told him I couldn't make the delivery in these conditions. But I kept thinking about those people in Kalispell, freezing in their homes, waiting for the heaters. And I kept thinking about Rhett Barlow, both of them. The one from 1883 who'd died trying to rescue travelers, and the one from 2024 who'd vanished trying to check on drivers. Both of them out in the cold. Both of them doing their jobs. So I kept driving. The road climbed after White Sulphur Springs, winding up through hills covered in pine trees. The trees were barely visible now, just dark shapes looming out of the snow. The wind was constant, howling past the cab, rattling the mirrors. I could hear the trailer behind me groaning under the strain. Could feel the weight shifting as we took the curves. I tried the CB radio. "Westbound on Highway 200, anybody out there?" Static. "Any trucks between White Sulphur Springs and Lincoln, come back." Nothing but the hiss and crackle of empty air. I clicked through the channels trying to find someone, anyone. But all the frequencies were dead. Either my radio was malfunctioning, or I was the only person stupid enough to be out here in this weather. The highway sign for Rogers Pass appeared in my headlights. Elevation 5,610 feet. One of the highest points on Highway 200 and one of the most dangerous in winter. The wind up here could knock a truck sideways if you weren't careful. I downshifted and slowed to 30, keeping both hands firm on the wheel. As I climbed toward the pass, I noticed something in my mirror. Headlights. Two of them, mounted high, cutting through the snow about a quarter-mile back. I felt my stomach tighten. Not again, not now. I watched them, waiting to see what they'd do. They didn't get closer. They didn't fall back. They just stayed there, matching my speed exactly, maintaining that same fixed distance I'd seen before. I reached for the CB. "Vehicle behind me on Highway 200, you trying to pass?" Static. "State truck behind me, that you?" Nothing. My hands were shaking. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to steady them. This was happening again. Same vehicle, same behavior, same presence following me through the storm. But this time I was ready. This time I wasn't going to panic. I kept driving, kept my eyes forward, kept my speed steady. The headlights stayed with me. Mile after mile, curve after curve, never varying, never changing, just following. The pass was worse than I'd expected. The wind up here was brutal, hitting the trailer broadside, making the whole rig shudder. Snow was piling up on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. I had to lean forward and squint just to see the road. The temperature gauge read -8. Outside, it was probably closer to -30 with the wind chill. I came over the top of the pass and started the descent on the other side. This was the dangerous part. Too much brake, and the wheels could lock up on the ice. Too little, and the trailer could start pushing the cab, jackknifing the whole rig. I downshifted again, letting the engine hold us back, tapping the brakes gently when I needed to. In the mirror, the headlights followed, still the same distance, still perfectly matched to my speed. I thought about what I'd learned. About Rhett Barlow from 1883, lost in a blizzard trying to help others. About Rhett Barlow from 2024, vanishing while checking on drivers. About the historical marker that said, his dedication to helping others is remembered. Was that what this was? Some kind of echo? Some residual presence that kept doing its job even after death? The rational part of my brain rejected that idea completely. Ghosts weren't real. Dead people didn't drive trucks. There had to be a logical explanation. A real vehicle, a real driver, maybe someone from the highway department who was following me to make sure I made it through safely. That made sense. That was reasonable. But then why wouldn't they answer on the radio? Why had the other highway workers said they'd never found the truck? Why did it only appear in storms, in the dark, in the empty places where help was needed most? The road leveled out, and I entered a long, straight stretch. The snow was flying horizontally now, coming at the windshield like tracer rounds. I could barely see 50 feet ahead. My headlights just reflected back at me, turning the world into a white wall. The headlights behind me disappeared. I checked all 3 mirrors, nothing. Just darkness and snow. They were gone, just like before, just like they always did. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Like whatever had been watching over me had decided I didn't need help anymore. Or maybe it had decided I was on my own. I drove for another hour, grinding through the storm, fighting to keep the truck on the road. My eyes burned from staring at the snow. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. My back was stiff, my shoulders tight. But I kept going, kept pushing west toward Lincoln, toward Ovando, toward Kalispell. Around 9 p.m. I saw lights ahead. Not headlights, but the orange glow of a building. A small gas station on the edge of Lincoln, still open despite the storm. I pulled into the lot, parked near the pumps, and killed the engine. For a long moment I just sat there, listening to the wind howl, listening to the metal tick as the engine cooled. Inside the gas station, a young kid behind the counter looked up from his phone. He couldn't have been more than 19, skinny with bad skin and tired eyes. "Crazy out there, huh?" "Yeah." My voice came out rough. I cleared my throat. "You guys got coffee?" "Yeah, over there. Help yourself." I poured a cup and stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot. My truck sat there alone, snow piling up on the hood and the roof. Beyond it, the highway was barely visible, just a faint, dark line between white shoulders. "You heading west?" the kid asked. "Kalispell." He whistled. "That's a long way in this weather. They closed the pass about an hour ago. Rogers Pass, too dangerous." I stared at him. "I just came over Rogers Pass. It was open." "No way, man." I heard it on the radio. State Patrol closed it at 8, not letting anyone through until the plows catch up. I came through at 8:30. The kid shrugged. Then you got lucky. They must have just opened it back up. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd been the only vehicle on that pass. No plows, no state trucks, no patrol cars. Just me and the headlights that had followed me. The headlights that had disappeared right before I started down the far side, right where the dangerous descent began. Like someone had been there to make sure I got over the pass safely. And once I was clear, they'd moved on to find someone else who needed help. I paid for the coffee and walked back out to the truck. The wind hit me like a wall, nearly knocked me sideways. I climbed into the cab and sat there, staring at the highway, at the darkness beyond the orange lights of the gas station. I thought about turning back, about calling my dispatcher and telling him I couldn't make the delivery, that the conditions were too dangerous. But those heaters were needed. People were counting on them. And I'd already come this far. I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. The last 60 miles to Kalispell were the longest of my life. The storm got worse, if that was possible. The wind was relentless, the snow so thick I could barely see the hood of my own truck. I was navigating by feel, by instinct, by the slight variations in how the tires sounded when they found pavement versus when they hit ice or gravel. I passed through Ovando without seeing anything but a faint blur of lights. Crossed over the Blackfoot River on a bridge I couldn't see, trusting that it was there because the road said it should be. The whole world had shrunk to just the cab of the truck, just the yellow glow of my dashboard lights and the endless white beyond the windshield. And then, in my mirror, the headlights appeared again. I didn't react this time. Didn't try the radio, didn't speed up or slow down. I just acknowledged them, gave a small nod like you might to another driver passing on the highway. And I kept driving. They stayed with me all the way to the outskirts of Kalispell, right up until the moment when the streetlights started appearing, when houses became visible on either side of the road, when the storm seemed to ease just a little. Then they faded, slowly, like someone turning down a dimmer switch, until they were gone. I delivered the heaters at 11:47 p.m. The warehouse manager looked shocked to see me. Jesus, I didn't think anyone was crazy enough to drive in this weather. Emergency delivery, I said. Well, you made it. That's what counts. I got him to sign the paperwork, declined his offer of coffee, and drove to a motel near the airport. I was too tired to go any further, too tired to think straight. I parked the truck, grabbed my overnight bag, and checked into a room that smelled like old carpet and chemical air freshener. I should have slept for 12 hours, should have crashed hard and not woken up until noon. But I was awake by 5 a.m., lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop turning. I kept thinking about those headlights, about the way they'd appeared when the road was at its worst, and disappeared when I reached safety. About Rhett Barlow, both of them, and what it meant to keep doing your job even after you were gone. At dawn, I got dressed and drove back toward Highway 200. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for answers. Maybe I just needed to see the road in daylight. Needed to prove to myself that it was real, that I hadn't imagined everything. The storm had passed. The sky was clear and bright, painfully blue. The sun reflected off the snow, turning everything white and blinding. I drove east, retracing my route from the night before. Past Ovando, past the Blackfoot River, past all those empty stretches where I'd fought to keep the truck on the road. Everything looked different in daylight. Normal. Safe. Just another Montana highway on a winter morning. I pulled over at a turnout near Rogers Pass and got out. The cold was sharp, but still no wind now. I walked to the edge of the shoulder and looked down at the valley below. From up here you could see for miles. Snow-covered mountains, dark pine forests, the thin ribbon of highway cutting through it all. And I thought about all the drivers who'd come this way over the years, all the people who'd pushed through storms, who'd fought to make deliveries, who'd taken risks they shouldn't have taken. How many of them had been followed by those headlights? How many had been watched over by something they couldn't see or explain? I stood there for a long time, breathing the cold air, watching the sun climb higher. Then I walked back to the truck and drove east, leaving Montana behind once more. But I knew I'd be back. The road always brings you back, whether you want it or not. And next time, if I saw those headlights in my mirror, I wouldn't be afraid. I'd just keep driving, keep doing my job, the way Rhett Barlow had done his. The way he was still doing, maybe, out there in the storm. Watching, following, making sure no one was left alone in the cold. That was 8 months ago. Since then, I've made the Montana run a dozen times. Sometimes in good weather, sometimes in bad. I've driven Highway 200 in summer sunshine and autumn rain, through early morning fog and late evening twilight. And I've seen those headlights 3 more times. Always at night. Always in bad weather. Always keeping that same distance. Never closer. Never farther. And each time they've stayed with me until I reached safety, until the road improved, or the storm broke, or civilization appeared. Then they've faded, disappeared, moved on to find someone else. I don't talk about it with other drivers. Don't mention it to dispatchers or warehouse managers or anyone else. What would be the point? They'd think I was crazy, or they'd try to come up with rational explanations that would just make me doubt what I know to be true. Because I do know. I know what I've seen. I know what's out there on those roads. Some people say Highway 200 is haunted. Others say it's cursed. They talk about accidents and disappearances, about cars found empty and drivers never seen again. But I don't think it's either of those things. I think it's something else. Something older and simpler. I think it's just someone doing their job, making sure travelers get home safe, making sure no one gets lost in the storm, doing it the way they always did, the way they'll keep doing as long as there are roads to drive and people who need help. Rhett Barlow died in 1883, trying to rescue stranded travelers in a blizzard. His descendant vanished in 2024, checking on drivers in a winter storm. Same name, same mission, same lonely stretch of Montana highway. More than a century apart, but somehow still connected. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country, when the snow is falling and the wind is howling and I'm the only vehicle on the road, I check my mirrors. And if I see those yellow headlights hanging back there in the darkness, I don't get scared anymore. I just nod, just a small acknowledgement, one professional to another. And I keep driving, because that's what we do. We drive through the storms. We make the deliveries. We keep the world moving, mile by mile, load by load, through whatever weather comes our way. And sometimes, when we need it most, we're not alone out there. Sometimes, someone's watching over us. Someone who understands that the job never really ends. Not as long as there are people who need help. Not as long as there are roads that need to be driven. Last month, I was heading west on Highway 200 again, hauling furniture to Missoula. It was late October, first real storm of the season. The snow was coming down hard, visibility maybe 30 yards. I was grinding along at 40 miles per hour, just trying to stay on the road. My CB crackled. A voice came through, faint and broken. "Westbound truck near Lincoln, doing?" I grabbed the mic. "This is westbound on 200, I'm managing. Roads are bad, but passable." "Careful, pass ahead, closed earlier." "Copy that, appreciate the heads up. You out here checking roads?" Static, then faintly, "Someone has to." The signal died. I tried calling back but got nothing. just the hiss of empty air. In my mirror, I saw the headlights, right where they always were, right where they'd been before. "Thanks, Rhett," I said quietly. To no one. To the storm, to the darkness. I got it from here. The headlights stayed with me for another 20 miles. Then, as I crested a hill and started down into the valley where Missoula spreads out like a pool of light, they faded, slowly, gradually, until they were gone. I made my delivery, grabbed a hotel room, slept for 10 hours. When I woke up, the storm had passed and the world looked clean and new, covered in fresh snow. I checked the news online, looking for updates about road conditions, about accidents or incidents. There was one story, just a small article buried on the second page of the local section. Highway 200 claims another victim, body found near Rogers Pass. I read it 3 times, feeling cold despite the warm hotel room. The body of a male hiker was found yesterday near Rogers Pass on Highway 200. The man, whose identity is being withheld pending notification of family, appears to have died of exposure during last night's storm. State Patrol officials say the hiker was likely attempting to reach the highway when he became disoriented in the blizzard. They remind travelers that winter storms in Montana can be deadly and urge people to avoid unnecessary travel during severe weather. I sat there staring at the screen. A hiker. Someone who'd been out in that storm trying to reach the highway, trying to survive. And they'd died maybe around the same time I'd been driving through, maybe in the same area. And I'd made it through safely because something had been following me. Making sure I stayed on the road. Making sure I didn't get lost. But the hiker had been alone. No one watching over them. No yellow headlights keeping pace in the darkness. I closed my laptop and sat there for a long time, thinking about luck and chance and whether there was any difference between them. Then I packed up my things and headed back to Wyoming, where I live now, where my truck is parked when I'm not on the road. But I'll be back in Montana soon. There's always another load, another delivery, another reason to drive through that empty country. And maybe next time, if I see someone on the side of the road, someone who looks lost or stranded or in trouble, I'll stop. I'll offer them a ride, get them somewhere warm and safe. Maybe that's my job now. Maybe that's what you do when you've been watched over, when you've been kept safe by something you can't explain. You pass it on, you help someone else. You keep doing the work, mile after mile, until the road runs out or you do, whichever comes first. The snow is starting to fall again. I can see it through my window, thick white flakes drifting down from a gray sky. The weather report says there's a storm coming. A big one. Roads will be dangerous. Travel not advised. My phone is ringing. It's my dispatcher. I already know what he's going to ask. And I already know my answer. Because someone has to drive through the storms. Someone has to make sure the load gets delivered. Someone has to keep moving. Keep rolling, keep the wheels turning, even when it's cold, even when it's dark, even when you're alone out there on empty roads with nothing but your headlights and your faith, and the ghost of someone who died doing the same thing you're doing now. Someone has to go, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you're not really alone at all. Sometimes, someone's still out there, still watching, still making sure you make it home. I pick up the phone. "Yeah," I say. My name is Sawyer T. Reddick, and I've been hauling freight up to the Yukon for 11 years now. Most drivers won't take these runs. Too remote, they say, too cold, too many miles of nothing between fuel stops. But I don't mind the isolation. After my divorce, after the house sold and the lawyers took their cut, I needed the kind of quiet you can only find at the edge of the world. The Yukon gave me that. Long stretches of highway where you might not see another vehicle for hours. Just you and the engine and the road rolling out forever under a sky so big it makes you feel small in a good way. The Alaska Highway runs from Dawson Creek in British Columbia all the way up through the Yukon to Delta Junction in Alaska. 1,500 miles of two-lane blacktop, cutting through wilderness that hasn't changed much since the road was built back in 1942. In summer, it's almost pleasant. Midnight sun, decent weather, tourists in RVs taking photos of moose and mountains. But in winter, it's a different animal. Temperatures drop to 40 below. The road ices over. The sun barely clears the horizon before it's setting again. You drive in darkness for 16 hours a day, and the darkness up here isn't like darkness anywhere else. It's absolute, dense, the kind of dark that presses against your windows and makes you check your mirrors more often than you should. It was mid-January when I got the call for a rush delivery. Mining equipment headed to a site near Whitehorse. The gear had been delayed by weather, and now the client was desperate. They needed it yesterday, would pay double rate plus hazard bonus if I could get it there within 48 hours. I was in Fort Nelson at the time, which meant I had about 700 miles to cover. Normally, that's an easy 2-day run, but the weather forecast was calling for heavy snow and high winds. Still, double rate is double rate. I told my dispatcher I'd take it. The load was waiting for me at a warehouse on the edge of town. Industrial compressors, drill bits, replacement parts for excavators. Heavy stuff, but well within my truck's capacity. The warehouse crew helped me get everything strapped down tight. Double-checked the chains, made sure the weight was distributed properly. The foreman, an older guy with a gray beard and tired eyes, watched me work. "You heading up tonight?" he asked. "That's the plan. Might want to reconsider. Storm's supposed to hit around midnight. I'll be ahead of it if I leave now." He shook his head. "Your funeral. Just make sure you got chains, flares, emergency supplies. If you slide off up there, might be days before anyone finds you." "Appreciate the concern," I said, but I'd already made up my mind. The truck was loaded, the paperwork was signed, and I had miles to make. I pulled out of Fort Nelson at 6:15 p.m. The sun had already set, leaving just a thin band of red on the western horizon. By the time I merged onto the Alaska Highway heading north, it was full dark. The temperature gauge on my dash read -22. Outside, it was probably closer to -30 with the wind. I could hear the tires crunching on the frozen snow that had blown across the pavement, that distinctive sound like walking on styrofoam. The highway was empty. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just my headlights cutting through the darkness and the white line disappearing under my wheels. On both sides, the forest pressed in close, black spruce and lodgepole pine so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet into them. Above, the sky was clear and packed with stars. No moon yet, but the stars were so bright they cast shadows. I settled into the drive, letting my body find that comfortable rhythm where you're not quite thinking, not quite zoned out, just existing in the moment. Hands loose on the wheel, eyes scanning the road ahead. Part of your attention on the mirrors, part on the engine sounds, part on the feel of the tires against the pavement. After 11 years, it's all muscle memory. Your body knows what to do without your brain having to get involved. Around 7:30, I crossed into the Yukon. The border isn't much to look at, just a sign and a small building that's only staffed during daylight hours. I kept rolling, climbing gradually as the highway wound through low hills covered in snow. The road was in good shape, recently plowed, with fresh gravel scattered on the curves. I made good time, keeping my speed around 65 on the straightaways, dropping to 50 on the hills. The first strange thing happened around 8 o'clock. I was listening to the CB radio, monitoring Channel 19 like I always do. Mostly, it's quiet up here. just the occasional trucker calling out his location or asking about road conditions. But sometimes you'll catch conversations, drivers keeping each other company through the long, dark miles. It helps to hear another human voice, even if they're 100 miles away. The radio had been silent for the past hour. Then, suddenly, a voice cut through. Male, middle-aged, the words clipped and urgent. "Grant, Grant, you copy?" I waited, listening. No response. The voice came again. "Grant, this is dispatch. Come back." Still nothing. I picked up my mic, about to ask if they needed help, when the voice spoke again. "Grant, we're showing you off route. What's your 20? Silence. Just the hiss of static. Then, faintly, another voice. This one sounded far away, like it was coming through from a weak signal. "Still on the highway? Can't see?" "Grant, say again. You're breaking up." Dark. So dark. "Grant, give me mile markers. What's your location?" The signal dissolved into static. I waited for more, but the radio went quiet. Just the soft crackle of empty frequencies. I figured it was some dispatcher trying to reach a driver who'd wandered out of range or lost signal in a valley. Happens all the time up here. The terrain plays hell with radio waves, and cell towers are few and far between. Still, something about the exchange bothered me. The urgency in the dispatcher's voice, the fear in the other voice, the one called Grant. I clicked my mic. "Anyone on 19, this is a northbound truck near the Yukon border. You guys need assistance?" No answer. I tried again. "Dispatch calling for Grant, I'm monitoring 19. Want me to relay a message?" Static. I shrugged and hung the mic back up. Not my problem. If they needed help, they'd ask for it. But over the next hour, I kept hearing fragments of the same conversation. It would come and go, sometimes clear, sometimes buried under interference. Always the same dispatcher, always calling for Grant. And sometimes just barely audible, that second voice responding. Never with complete sentences, never with anything useful, just fragments. Lost, following the lights, cold. Each time the dispatcher would ask for a location, for mile markers for anything concrete, and each time the response would be garbled or cut off entirely. Around 9:30, I reached a small settlement called Coal River. It's not much, just a gas station, a lodge, and a few scattered buildings. But it's one of the few places to stop between Fort Nelson and Whitehorse, and I needed to fuel up. I pulled into the gas station and killed the engine. The cold hit me like a hammer when I opened the door. It wasn't just cold, it was vicious. The kind of cold that burns your lungs when you breathe, that makes your eyes water and your face ache. I hurried to swipe my card and get the pump running, then jogged to the station building while the tank filled. Inside, it was blazingly warm. The heat turned up so high I could feel my face tingling as the blood returned. A woman stood behind the counter, maybe 40 years old, wearing a heavy sweater and reading a paperback. She looked up when I came in. "Just fueling," I said. "Help yourself to coffee if you want it." "Fresh pot." I poured a cup and stood by the window, watching my truck. The gas station was empty except for my rig and an old pickup parked near the building. No other traffic on the highway. Just the darkness and the cold and the stars overhead. "Quiet tonight?" I said. The woman nodded. "Always is in winter. Lucky to see 1 or 2 vehicles a day this time of year." "You hear anything on the radio? Dispatcher trying to reach someone named Grant?" She frowned. "No, but our CB's been acting weird lately. Getting interference. Voices coming through that don't make sense. Probably sunspot activity or something." "Yeah, probably." I paid for the fuel and coffee, then headed back out into the cold. The pump had stopped, the tank full. I replaced the nozzle and climbed back into the cab, starting the engine and cranking the heat. My fingers were numb, my face stinging. I sat there for a minute, letting the warmth seep back into me. The CB crackled. Grant, where are you?" I grabbed the mic. "Dispatch, this is a northbound truck at Coal River. I've been hearing you calling for Grant. You want me to keep an eye out?" Nothing, just static. I tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy? I can relay if you need me to." Still nothing. Like they couldn't hear me at all. Like I was shouting into a void. I hung up the mic and pulled back onto the highway. The road ahead was straight and empty, disappearing into the darkness. I pushed the truck up to 70, trying to make up time. Over the next 2 hours, the voice on the radio became more frequent. Every 15 or 20 minutes, the dispatcher would call out for Grant. And every so often, that faint second voice would respond. But the responses were getting stranger, less coherent. Just single words now, spoken so softly I had to turn up the volume to hear them. Grant. Cold. Dark. Help. At 11:45, I reached the Rancheria River. The bridge here is long and high, spanning a gorge where the river cuts through solid rock. In summer, you can see the water rushing below. In winter, it's frozen solid, just a white scar at the bottom of a black chasm. I slowed down to cross the bridge, the truck's weight making the steel girders groan. Halfway across, the CB erupted with static so loud I flinched. Then a voice cut through, clearer than before, almost like someone was sitting in the cab with me. Grant, Grant, Grant. Not the dispatcher this time. This was different. Mechanical, almost. Like a recording stuck on repeat. Just the name, over and over, echoing across the frequency. Grant, 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 I grabbed the mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. The voice didn't change, didn't acknowledge me, just kept repeating. Grant, Grant, Grant. I switched channels, moving from 19 to 17, then to 9. On each channel I could hear it. Faint on some, louder on others, but always there. That same voice, saying the same name, over and over like a mantra or a prayer. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The radio went silent. Not even static now, just dead air. I clicked through all the channels. Nothing. Complete silence. I hung up the mic and kept driving, but my hands were shaking. Something about that voice, the way it had repeated the name with no emotion, no inflection, like it was a machine designed to do only one thing. It had crawled under my skin, made the cab feel smaller, made the darkness outside feel heavier. At 12:30 a.m., I saw lights ahead. Another vehicle on the highway, the first I'd seen in hours. As I got closer, I realized it was a semi, heading north like me, but moving slower. I eased off the throttle and kept my distance, not wanting to crowd them. The CB crackled. Northbound truck behind me, you trying to pass? Finally, another real voice. I grabbed the mic. Negative, just following. How's the road ahead? Clear and cold. You hear that weird stuff on the radio earlier? Yeah. Dispatcher looking for someone named Grant. You know anything about it? Nope. Been hearing it for the past hour, though. Creepy as hell. Someone's lost out here, I guess. Maybe. Where you headed? White Horse. You? Same. Want to run together for a while? Sure. Company's good. Been alone out here too long. We drove in convoy for the next hour. His taillights ahead of me, my headlights lighting up his trailer. It felt good to have another driver nearby, someone real and solid. The radio chatter between us was minimal, just occasional check-ins and observations about the road. But it was enough to keep the darkness at bay. Around 1:30 we approached Teslin Lake. The highway runs along the shore here with the frozen lake stretching away to the east. On a clear night like this, you can see across the ice to the mountains on the far side, their peaks lit by starlight. It's beautiful and eerie at the same time, like driving through a landscape that belongs to another world. The driver ahead of me clicked his mic. "I need to pull over for a minute. Got to check my straps." "Copy that. Want me to wait?" "Nah, I'm good. You go ahead. I'll catch up." I watched his truck pull onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. I gave him a wave in the mirror and kept rolling, picking up speed as I left him behind. And just like that, I was alone again. The silence felt heavier now, like it had weight. I turned up the heater, even though the cab was already warm, checked the mirrors more often than I needed to. Scanned the road ahead for any sign of movement. The CB stayed quiet. No dispatcher calling for Grant. No mechanical voice repeating the name. Just empty frequencies and the soft hiss of cosmic background radiation. I drove through the darkness, watching the mile markers tick past. 810, 815, 820. Each one taking me deeper into the Yukon, deeper into the emptiness. The highway curved and climbed, dropped into valleys and crossed frozen creeks. The forest pressed in on both sides, an endless wall of black trees. Occasionally I'd see eyes reflecting in my headlights. Animals watching from the tree line. Wolves or coyotes or maybe just deer. Hard to tell at 65 miles per hour. At 2:15 a.m. I saw a glow on the horizon. As I got closer, it resolved into lights. A small cluster of buildings, a roadhouse or lodge. I checked my map. Swift River, population maybe 50 in summer, probably half that in winter. But they had a gas station and a restaurant that was supposedly open 24 hours. I signaled and pulled into the parking lot. There were two other vehicles there, a pickup truck and an SUV, both covered in snow like they'd been parked for days. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, psyching myself up to face the cold again. Inside the roadhouse, the air was thick with the smell of fried food and coffee. A handful of people sat scattered around the room. A couple of guys at the bar, an older woman in a booth, a young man with headphones staring at a laptop. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 30s, dark hair pulled back, tired eyes that had seen too many long winter nights. I took a seat at the counter and ordered coffee and a burger. The woman poured the coffee and slid it across to me. "Traveling late," she said. Not a question, just an observation. "Making a delivery to Whitehorse. Need to get there by tomorrow afternoon. Long drive in the dark. I'm used to it." She nodded and went to put in my food order. I sipped the coffee, letting it warm me from the inside. Around the room, the other customers sat in silence, not talking, not looking at each other, just existing in their own private worlds. The CB on the counter crackled. The woman glanced at it, then turned the volume down. "Things been acting up all week," she said when she came back. "Getting signals from who knows where. You hear anyone calling for someone named Grant?" She paused, her hand halfway to a coffee pot. "How do you know about that?" "Been hearing it on my radio for the past few hours. Dispatcher trying to reach a driver. Figured it was someone lost or broken down." The woman set the coffee pot down and leaned against the counter. "We've been hearing it for 3 days now. Started Monday night. Same voice, same name, over and over. Sometimes it's a dispatcher, sometimes it's just that one word repeated. Grant, 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 like that." "Any idea who it is?" She shook her head. "Called the Highway Department, the RCMP, even the radio station in Whitehorse. Nobody knows anything about it. No missing drivers, no distress calls, nothing. It's just this voice on the radio, calling for someone who doesn't answer." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. 3 days? 3 days and counting. Some people think it's a hoax, someone messing around. But I don't know. There's something about it that feels wrong. Too persistent, too real. My burger arrived and I ate it slowly, thinking. 3 days of a voice calling out for someone on the CB. No explanation, no resolution. Just the same message repeating endlessly in the darkness. I finished eating, paid my bill, and headed back out to the truck. The cold hit me again. Even worse now that I'd warmed up inside. I climbed into the cab and started the engine, letting it idle for a minute while I checked my load. Everything looked secure, straps tight. Nothing shifted. The CB was silent. I pulled back onto the highway and continued north. The road was straight here, running through flat terrain where the trees had been cleared away for pipeline or power line access. On both sides, the forest was a distant dark line against the stars. At 3:00 a.m., the voice came back. Grant. Just the one word. Soft and distant, like it was coming from very far away. Grant. I didn't respond, just listened. Grant, where are you, Grant? Then static, then silence. I drove faster, pushing the truck up to 75. I wanted to be out of here, wanted to reach Whitehorse and drop this load and get the hell back to civilization. The darkness felt oppressive now, malevolent, like it was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. The voice spoke again. Grant, can you hear me? I grabbed the mic. This is a northbound truck on the Alaska Highway. Who is Grant? What's your emergency? No response. The voice just kept calling. Grant, answer me, Grant. Who are you? I shouted into the mic. What do you want? Silence. Then, so faint, I almost missed it. Help him. Help who? Where is he? But the radio had gone dead again. Just static and empty air. I drove on through the darkness, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The highway stretched out ahead of me, endless and empty, disappearing into the void. And somewhere out there in the cold and the dark, someone named Grant was lost. Or maybe he'd been lost for a long time. Maybe he'd been lost for 3 days. Maybe longer. The thought made my stomach clench. I tried to push it away, tried to focus on the road, on the simple mechanical act of driving. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. That there was a connection I wasn't making, a pattern I wasn't seeing. At 3:30 a.m., I saw something on the shoulder ahead. A shape, dark against the snow. As I got closer, I realized it was a truck. A semi, parked at an angle with its hazard lights off, like it had just stopped there in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down, my heart racing. This was bad. You don't park on the shoulder up here unless you have a problem. And if you have a problem, you keep your hazards on so other drivers can see you. I pulled up alongside the truck and looked over. It was an older model, maybe 15 years old, with rust showing through the paint. The cab was dark, no lights inside. I couldn't see if anyone was in it. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from my truck, leaving the engine running. The cold wrapped around me like a fist. I walked over to the other truck, my boots crunching in the snow, and shone my light through the driver's side window. Empty. No driver, no personal belongings visible, nothing. Just an empty cab with frost on the inside of the windows. I tried the door. Locked. I walked around to the passenger side and tried that door too. Also locked. The trailer was a dry van, doors closed and sealed. I checked the plates. Yukon registration, but they were so covered in road grime I couldn't make out the numbers. I stood there in the cold, trying to decide what to do. Call it in? But call who? The RCMP were probably hours away, and this truck might have been here for days. Keep driving? That felt wrong, like abandoning someone who might need help. The CB on my truck crackled. I could hear it even from here, 15 feet away. Grant, Grant, Grant. I walked back to my truck and climbed into the cab. The voice was clearer now, louder, almost urgent. Grant, we're coming for you. Hold on, Grant, we're coming. I stared at the radio. Who was coming? Coming from where? I grabbed the mic. This is a truck stopped near mile marker 863. I found an abandoned semi on the shoulder. No driver visible. Anyone know anything about this? The voice didn't acknowledge me. It just kept calling. Grant, we're coming. Hold on. I looked back at the empty truck sitting on the shoulder. Dark and silent and abandoned. Then I looked at my own truck, warm and running and full of light. And I made a decision. I put my truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I didn't call it in. I didn't wait around to see if anyone showed up. I just drove. Because sometimes on these roads, you're better off not knowing. Better off keeping your eyes forward and your wheels moving. Better off trusting your instincts when they tell you that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. The voice followed me for another hour, calling out for Grant, promising help was coming, saying, hold on just a little longer. And I drove through the darkness, watching the mile markers tick past, counting down the distance to Whitehorse, because I needed to get there, needed to be somewhere with lights and people and solid ground under my feet, somewhere that wasn't this endless frozen highway with its abandoned trucks and its voices in the dark, somewhere safe, if such a place existed anymore. I reached the outskirts of Whitehorse around 5:30 a.m. The sky was still black, no hint of dawn yet, but the city lights created a glow on the horizon that felt like salvation. After hours of driving through absolute darkness, seeing those lights made my chest loosen, made me realize how tight I'd been holding myself together. But I wasn't going straight to the warehouse. The delivery wasn't scheduled until noon, and I was running ahead of schedule despite everything. I needed to stop, needed to get out of the cab, needed to be around other people for a while. There was a truck stop on the southern edge of town, a place I'd used before. 24-hour restaurant, fuel pumps, a small convenience store. Nothing fancy, but it would do. I pulled into the lot and parked between two other semis. Their engines were running, the drivers probably asleep in their cabs. I killed my engine and just sat there for a moment listening to the silence. No CB chatter, no voices calling for Grant, just the tick of cooling metal and the whisper of wind across the windshield. I climbed down from the cab, my legs stiff from 6 hours of sitting. The cold hit me, but it felt different here, less hostile somehow. Maybe it was just the presence of other vehicles, other people nearby, or maybe I was so tired that my brain wasn't processing fear anymore. Inside the restaurant, the lights were harsh and fluorescent, turning everything yellow-white. A handful of people sat scattered around, mostly truckers nursing coffee and staring at nothing. Behind the counter stood a woman I recognized, Elowyn March. She'd been working here for years, one of those people who seemed to be part of the landscape, always present, always steady. She looked up when I came in and gave me a nod. Sawyer, long time. Hey, Elowyn, coffee and whatever's hot. Breakfast special's about all I got this hour. Eggs, bacon, toast. Perfect. I took a seat at the counter where I could see the parking lot through the window. My truck sat there solid and real, with the two other rigs on either side. Normal. Safe. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug she'd poured and let the heat seep into my fingers. Elowyn slid a plate in front of me and leaned against the counter. You look rough. Long drive. From where? Fort Nelson. Started around 6 last night. She raised an eyebrow. That's a hell of a run in one shot. What are you, trying to kill yourself? Double rate. rush delivery. Not worth dying for. She glanced around the empty restaurant, then lowered her voice. You hear anything weird on the radio tonight? I stopped with the fork halfway to my mouth. Like what? Like someone calling for a person named Grant over and over. I set the fork down. Yeah, I heard it. Started around 8 p.m., kept going for hours. You know what that's about? Elowen shook her head. No clue, but it's been going on for days now. 3, maybe 4 days. Some drivers come in here talking about it, asking if we know who Grant is, if there's been an accident or a missing person report, but nobody knows anything. The woman at Swift River said the same thing. Said they'd called the RCMP, the highway department, everybody. No one's reported missing. That's what I heard, too. Elowen paused, then added, But here's the thing that bothers me. I've been working here for 8 years. I know most of the drivers who come through regularly, know their schedules, their routes, and I'm telling you, I haven't seen a new driver in days. No strangers, no one I don't recognize. So, whoever's calling for Grant, wherever he is, he's not passing through here. And this is the only truck stop between Fort Nelson and Alaska. If you're driving this highway, you stop here. But nobody new has stopped here in almost a week. I felt that chill again, crawling up my spine. Maybe they're coming from the other direction, from Alaska heading south. Maybe, but I haven't seen anyone from that direction either. It's been dead, Sawyer, quieter than I've ever seen it. You're only the 3rd truck I've had tonight, and the other 2 have been parked here since yesterday. I looked out the window at the parking lot. The 2 trucks on either side of mine, engines idling, no movement visible. Those drivers inside their cabs, far as I know, they come in for meals, use the bathroom, go back out. Haven't talked to them much. I ate my breakfast slowly, thinking. If no new drivers had come through in days, then who was calling for Grant on the radio? Where was the dispatcher? Where was Grant himself? The one who occasionally responded with those broken fragments? You ever hear the voice yourself? I asked. Elowen nodded toward a CB radio mounted on the wall behind the counter. Got one here for monitoring highway conditions. It's been picking up the same thing everyone else hears. That voice calling out, over and over. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's just static, but it's always there. What does it sound like to you? She thought about it. Desperate. Like someone who's lost something and can't find it. Like they're not going to stop looking until they do. We both fell silent. Around us, the other customers sat hunched over their meals, not talking, not looking at each other. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, the wind pushed snow across the parking lot in thin white streams. Elowen refilled my coffee. You staying here for a bit, or you heading out? Got a delivery at noon. Figure I'll catch a few hours of sleep first. Good idea. You look dead on your feet. I finished eating and paid my bill, then headed back out to the truck. The cold wrapped around me, familiar now, almost comforting in its consistency. I climbed into the cab and pulled the curtains closed around the sleeper berth. Set my alarm for 10 a.m. Stretched out on the thin mattress and closed my eyes. Sleep should have come immediately. I was exhausted, every muscle in my body aching. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Elowen had said. No new drivers in days, no strangers passing through. Just the same familiar faces, the same regular routes. So who was Grant? I must have dozed off eventually because the next thing I knew my alarm was beeping and daylight was filtering through the curtains. I sat up, disoriented for a moment, not sure where I was. Then it all came back. The Yukon, the delivery, the voices on the radio. I checked my phone. 10:03 a.m. I'd slept for almost 4 hours, though it didn't feel like it. My body still ached, my eyes still burned. But at least I was functional. I climbed out of the sleeper and started the engine, letting it warm up while I did a walk-around inspection. Everything looked good, straps still tight, tires properly inflated. The 2 trucks that had been parked on either side of me were gone now, replaced by a pickup truck and a passenger van. Normal traffic. Normal day. Inside the restaurant, Elowin was still behind the counter. Different customers now, people eating lunch, talking quietly. I grabbed another coffee to go. "Get any sleep?" she asked. "Some. Enough. Drive safe. Weather's supposed to get bad again tonight. Always does." I paid and headed out, coffee in hand. The day was bright and clear, the sky that deep blue you only see at high latitudes in winter. The sun hung low on the horizon, barely clearing the mountains to the south. By 3 p.m. it would be setting again, plunging everything back into darkness. I pulled out of the truck stop and headed into Whitehorse. The city was small by most standards, maybe 30,000 people, but up here it felt like a metropolis. Actual traffic lights, multiple lanes, buildings taller than 2 stories. I navigated through the streets to the warehouse district on the north side, following the GPS on my phone. The delivery went smooth. The warehouse crew unloaded the mining equipment efficiently, checked everything against the manifest, had me sign the paperwork. I was in and out in under an hour. By 1 p.m., I was back on the road, heading south with an empty trailer. The plan was to make it back to Fort Nelson by morning, pick up another load, keep the wheels turning. That's how you make money in this business. Minimize downtime, maximize miles. But as I drove south through Whitehorse, past the airport and the industrial parks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have stayed longer, that I was leaving too soon, missing something important. I tried to push the thought away, focused on the road, on the routine of driving, but the feeling persisted. By 2 p.m., I was back on the Alaska Highway heading south. The road was familiar now, the same route I'd driven north just hours before. But in daylight it looked different, less threatening, more mundane. Just a 2-lane highway cutting through forest and mountains, cleared and plowed and perfectly ordinary. I passed the turnoff for Teslin Lake, the bridge over the Rancheria River, all the landmarks I'd driven past in the dark. They looked smaller in daylight, less ominous, just geography, just landscape. Around 3:30, as the sun was starting to set, I reached Swift River, the same roadhouse where I'd stopped on the way north. I thought about pulling in again, maybe asking more questions about the voices on the radio. But I was making good time, and I didn't want to lose momentum. I kept driving, the light faded quickly. By 4 p.m. I was back in full darkness, my headlights cutting through the night. The temperature had dropped again, down to -25 according to my gauge. The road was starting to ice over in spots, requiring more attention, more care. I turned on the CB radio, monitoring channel 19. For a while, it was quiet. Just the occasional trucker calling out their location or asking about conditions ahead. Normal traffic, normal conversation. Then, around 5 p.m., the voice came back. "Grant, can you hear me, Grant?" I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. Not again. I thought maybe it was over, that whatever had been happening the night before had resolved itself. But here it was again, that same desperate voice calling out into the darkness. "Grant, please respond. We need to know where you are." I picked up the mic. "This is a southbound truck on the Alaska Highway. Who is this? What's your emergency?" No response. The voice just kept calling. "Grant, Grant, answer me." "Who is Grant?" I tried again. "What agency are you with?" Still nothing. Like I was invisible, inaudible, Like my voice wasn't reaching anyone, I clicked through other channels. On every one, I could hear fragments of the same transmission. Sometimes clear, sometimes buried under static, but always there. That voice calling for Grant, begging for a response. On Channel 9, I heard something else, a different voice, not the dispatcher. This one was faint, barely audible, like it was coming from very far away. Can't find the road. I grabbed the mic. This is a southbound truck. If you're lost, give me your location. What mile marker are you near? So cold. Give me landmarks. What can you see? The lights. Following the lights. What lights? Describe them. But the voice faded, dissolving back into static. I waited, listening, but it didn't come back. Just the dispatcher again, still calling for Grant, the transmission looping endlessly like a recording that couldn't be stopped. I drove on through the darkness, checking the mirrors more often now, scanning the road ahead for any sign of another vehicle. But I was alone. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just my truck and the empty highway and the voices crackling through the CB. Around 6:30, I passed the spot where I'd seen the abandoned truck the night before. I slowed down, watching the shoulder, half expecting to see it still sitting there. But there was nothing. Just empty pavement and snow-covered ground. Like the truck had never existed at all. I stopped and backed up, pulling onto the shoulder where I thought I'd seen it, got out with my flashlight and walked along the edge of the road, looking for tire tracks or any sign that a vehicle had been parked here. Nothing. The snow was undisturbed, unmarked. If there had been a truck here 12 hours ago, there was no evidence of it now. I stood there in the cold, shining my light across the empty shoulder, trying to make sense of it. I knew what I'd seen. An older semi, rusted and dark, parked at an angle with no lights. I'd walked up to it, had looked through the windows, had tried the doors. It had been real, solid. But now it was gone, and there was no trace it had ever been here. I climbed back into my truck and sat there with the engine idling, staring at the empty space. Then I grabbed the CB mic. Anyone on 19, this is a southbound truck near mile marker 863. Did anyone see a truck parked on the shoulder here last night? Older model semi looked abandoned. Static. Any northbound traffic last night? Anybody pass a parked truck around mile 863? Nothing but silence. I tried one more time. Dispatch calling for Grant. I'm at mile 863. Is this where he was last seen? Is this where you lost contact? The radio crackled, and for a moment I thought someone was going to respond. Then that familiar voice cut through. Grant, Grant, where are you? Answer me, I said, my voice rising. Is this the location? Is this where Grant disappeared? Grant, please, Grant. Tell me what happened here, but the voice just kept calling, mechanical and persistent, like it was reading from a script that never changed. I slammed the mic back onto its hook and pulled back onto the highway, accelerating hard. The tires spun briefly on the ice before catching, and then I was moving, putting distance between myself and that empty shoulder. The voices followed me. For the next 3 hours, as I drove south through the darkness, the CB was never quiet. Sometimes it was the dispatcher calling for Grant. Sometimes it was that other voice, the faint one, saying things I could barely hear. Fragments about cold and darkness and lights that led nowhere. And sometimes when the static cleared for just a moment, I'd hear a third voice. This one different from the others, younger sounding, confused. Where am I? Can't see the road. Been driving for hours. No one will answer. Each fragment was brief. Just a few words before the static swallowed it again. But together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. Someone lost, someone driving in circles, someone calling for help that would never come. I tried multiple times to respond, to offer assistance, to get a location or any useful information. But like before, my transmissions went unanswered. It was like shouting into a void, like my voice existed in a different reality than theirs. By 9 p.m., I was approaching Coal River again, the gas station where I'd stopped on the way north. I pulled in, more for the comfort of lights and other people than because I needed fuel. The same woman was behind the counter, the same one who'd mentioned the weird radio interference. I went inside and poured myself coffee. She looked up from her paperback and nodded. Back already. Made the delivery, heading back south. That radio thing still happening? She gestured to the CB on the counter. Hasn't stopped. Still calling for Grant, still no answer. You ever hear other voices? Besides the dispatcher? Sometimes. Sounds like someone responding, but it's too faint to make out. Why? I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup. I've been hearing fragments, someone saying they're lost, that they can't find the road. Different voice than the dispatcher. The woman's expression changed, became more serious. That's new, or at least I haven't heard that part. Just the dispatcher calling and calling. How long can this go on? How long has it been now? 4 days. Started Sunday night, hasn't stopped since. 4 days of someone calling for help. 4 days of transmissions going nowhere, reaching no one. I thought about the truck I'd seen on the shoulder, the one that had vanished without a trace. Thought about what Elowin had said about no new drivers passing through, no strangers on the road. You ever heard the name Grant before? I asked. Any drivers who come through here regularly? She thought about it. Not that I can remember, but I don't know everyone's name. Most people just fuel up and move on. I paid for the coffee and headed back to the truck. As I climbed into the cab, the CB crackled to life. Grant, this is your last chance. Tell us where you are. The voice sounded different now. Less patient, more urgent, almost angry. Grant, we're running out of time. Time for what? I asked the radio, knowing I wouldn't get an answer. And I didn't. The voice went silent, and for the first time in hours, the radio was completely quiet. No static, no voices, nothing. Just dead air. I sat there listening to the silence, and somehow it was worse than the voices had been. At least the voices meant someone was out there, even if I couldn't reach them. The silence meant abandonment, meant giving up. I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. I wanted to get as far south as possible before I had to stop for the night. Wanted to put distance between myself and whatever was happening on these roads. But around 10:30, exhaustion caught up with me. I'd been awake for more than 20 hours, had driven almost 800 miles, and my body was shutting down. I found a pullout near the border, a small rest area with a few parking spots and an outhouse. 2 other trucks were already parked there, engines idling. I backed in between them and killed the engine. Pulled the curtains closed, set my alarm, stretched out in the sleeper. This time, I fell asleep almost immediately, too tired to worry about voices or abandoned trucks or anything else. I woke to silence. Complete, absolute silence. My alarm wasn't beeping. The engine wasn't running. I couldn't hear the wind or the other trucks or anything at all. I sat up, disoriented. Something felt wrong. I pulled back the curtain and looked out. The parking lot was empty. The 2 trucks that had been on either side of me were gone. No tire tracks, no sign they'd ever been there. Just empty, snow-covered pavement and darkness beyond. I checked my phone. 3:47 a.m. I'd slept for almost 5 hours, but my alarm should have gone off at 5 o'clock. Why was I awake? Then I heard it. Not through the CB this time, but outside. A voice, distant and muffled, calling through the darkness. Grant! I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of the cab. my heart pounding. The cold hit me, but I barely felt it. I shone my light across the parking lot, across the empty spaces where the other trucks had been. "Grant," the voice was coming from the trees, from the forest beyond the rest area. I walked toward it, my boots crunching in the snow, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Grant, where are you?" I reached the edge of the parking lot and stopped. The trees were thick here, the forest impenetrable, but I could hear the voice clearly now, coming from somewhere in those trees. Not far, maybe 50 yards, close enough that I should be able to see whoever was calling, but I saw nothing, just darkness and tree trunks and snow. "Hello?" I called out. "Do you need help?" The voice didn't respond to me. It just kept calling. "Grant, Grant." I took a step into the trees, following the voice. Then another step. The flashlight beam bounced off tree trunks and reflected off snow. Shadows moved at the edge of the light, but they were just branches swaying in the wind. Grant. Closer now. Maybe 30 yards. I could almost see where it was coming from. I took another step, pushing through a low branch. Snow fell on my head, cold and shocking. I brushed it off and kept moving. "Grant!" 20 yards. Right ahead, just beyond that cluster of spruce trees. I pushed forward, my breath coming in white clouds, my hands numb despite my gloves. The voice was so close now I should be able to see whoever was making it. Should be able to reach out and touch them. "Grant." I shone my light directly at the source of the voice. There was nothing there, just trees and snow and darkness. No person, no vehicle, nothing that could be making that sound. But the voice was right in front of me, so close I could feel the vibrations of it in the air. "Grant, Grant, Grant." I stumbled backward, suddenly terrified. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I turned and ran, crashing through the branches, slipping in the snow, my flashlight beam jerking wildly. Behind me, the voice continued calling, patient and persistent. I reached the parking lot and scrambled into my truck, slamming the door and locking it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the truck into gear, pulling out of the rest area faster than was safe. I didn't look back, didn't check the mirrors, just drove, focusing all my attention on the road ahead, on putting distance between myself and that voice in the trees. The CB was silent. No dispatcher, no Grant, no static, just dead air. I drove for 2 more hours before the sun came up, and only then did I start to feel safe again. The daylight revealed a normal highway, normal trees, normal world, but I knew what I'd heard, knew what I hadn't seen. Something was out there in those woods, something that wore voices like masks, that called for people who might not exist, that lived in the spaces between stations and frequencies, and I wanted nothing more to do with it. I reached Fort Nelson around 10 o'clock a.m. and went straight to the dispatcher's office. Told him I needed a week off, that I was exhausted and needed to rest. He could see it in my face, could hear it in my voice. He didn't argue. I drove to my apartment, parked the truck, and went inside. Drew all the curtains, unplugged the phone, turned off my cell. I needed silence. Real silence, not the kind that hides voices. For 3 days, I didn't leave the apartment. Didn't turn on the radio, didn't check the CB, didn't do anything except sleep and eat and try to forget. But I couldn't forget the voice in the trees. Couldn't stop wondering who Grant was, or if he'd ever existed at all. And I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there on the Alaska highway, in the darkness between the cities, something was still calling, still looking, still waiting for an answer that would never come. A week passed before I could bring myself to get back in the truck. 7 days of staring at walls, jumping at every sound, checking the locks on the doors multiple times before going to bed. My dispatcher called twice, asking when I'd be ready to roll again. I told him I needed more time. He said fine, but the jobs wouldn't wait forever. On the 8th day, I woke up and realized I couldn't hide anymore. Bills don't pay themselves, and I wasn't independently wealthy. I needed to work. More than that, I needed to prove to myself that I could still do this job, that I hadn't been broken by whatever I'd experienced out there. But I also needed answers. Needed to understand what I'd heard, what I'd seen, what had called to me from those trees. So, before I called my dispatcher back, I did something I'd never done before. I went to the library. Fort Nelson's public library was a small building on the main street. One room with a few shelves and 3 computer terminals. The librarian was an older man with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when I came in. "Help you find something?" "I need to search old news archives, local papers, accident reports, anything from the past few years." "What are you looking for?" "Missing person, trucker, might have disappeared on the Alaska Highway." He directed me to one of the computers and showed me how to access the newspaper database. Then he left me alone, going back to his desk. I started searching. Missing trucker Alaska Highway brought up dozens of results, going back decades. The highway was dangerous, especially in winter. People disappeared all the time, their vehicles found abandoned, sometimes their bodies recovered in spring when the snow melted. I narrowed the search. Missing Trucker 2023 gave me fewer results. I scrolled through them, reading headlines, looking for anything that might connect. Then I found it. Trucker missing after winter storm, search underway. The article was dated January 15th, 2023. Almost exactly 1 year ago. I clicked on it and started reading. RCMP are searching for Grant Holloway, 38, a commercial truck driver from Prince George, BC, who was reported missing after failing to complete a delivery to Whitehorse. Holloway was last seen at a fuel stop in Fort Nelson on the evening of January 13th, when he told staff he was heading north despite deteriorating weather conditions. His truck, a 2015 Freightliner hauling construction materials, has not been located. The last confirmed radio contact was at approximately 9:00 p.m. on January 13th, when Holloway reported his location as near mile marker 863 on the Alaska Highway. He stated he was experiencing mechanical difficulties and planned to assess the situation. No further transmissions were received. Mile marker 863, the exact spot where I'd seen the abandoned truck, the exact spot where I'd stopped and found nothing. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. Search and rescue teams have been hampered by extreme weather conditions, with temperatures dropping to -40 and high winds creating whiteout conditions. Holloway's family has requested that anyone with information contact the RCMP immediately. I searched for follow-up articles. Found one dated January 22nd, 2023. Search for missing trucker called off. No sign of vehicle or driver. After more than a week of intensive searching, RCMP have suspended the search for Grant Holloway, the truck driver who disappeared on the Alaska Highway. Despite aerial surveys, ground searches, and coordination with highway maintenance crews, no trace of Holloway or his vehicle has been found. "It's as if he vanished," stated Sergeant Thomas Ridley. "We've covered hundreds of miles of highway, checked every pull-out and rest area, and found nothing. At this point, we have to conclude that Mr. Holloway either left the immediate area under his own power, or that his vehicle left the roadway in a location we haven't yet discovered. The search will resume in spring when weather conditions improve." I kept searching. Found a final article dated May 2023. Missing trucker's case remains unsolved. 4 months after Grant Holloway disappeared on the Alaska Highway, his case remains open but unsolved. Spring thaw searches revealed no sign of his truck or body. His family continues to hope for answers. Grant was an experienced driver, his sister Sarah stated. He knew these roads. Something happened to him out there, and we deserve to know what. The RCMP maintained that the case remains active, but acknowledged that without new evidence, the investigation has reached a standstill. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen. Grant Holloway, missing for almost exactly a year. Last known location, mile marker 863, the same spot where I'd seen the truck. But that didn't explain the voices, didn't explain why a dispatcher would still be calling for him a year later, didn't explain why I could hear fragments of someone lost and confused, still trying to find their way. I printed the articles and kept searching, looked for other missing truckers, other disappearances on the Alaska Highway. Found more than I wanted to. The road had a history, a dark one. Over the decades, dozens of people had vanished. Some were found eventually, their vehicles recovered from ditches or ravines. Others were never seen again. But none of them were being called on the CB radio a year after their disappearance. I gathered the printouts and left the library. Outside, the day was clear and cold. The sun already low in the sky, even though it was only 2 p.m. I sat in my truck and read through the articles again, trying to make sense of it. Grant Holloway, 38 years old, experienced driver. Last seen heading north into a storm. Never arrived at his destination. No trace of him or his truck ever found. And now, a year later, someone or something was still calling for him on the radio. I pulled out my phone and searched for Sarah Holloway, the sister mentioned in the article. Found a Facebook profile for a woman in Prince George. Sent her a message, not really expecting a response. My name is Sawyer Reddick. I'm a trucker who drives the Alaska Highway regularly. I've been hearing radio transmissions that mention your brother Grant. I'd like to talk to you if you're willing. Then I called my dispatcher and told him I was ready to work again. He had a load for me. Agricultural supplies heading to a co-op in Dawson Creek. Easy run, good money, and it would get me back on the road without having to face the Alaska Highway right away. I took the job. Spent the next 3 days hauling feed and seed, making deliveries, keeping busy. It felt good to be working again, good to have a purpose. But I couldn't stop thinking about Grant Holloway, about those transmissions, about the voice in the trees. On the 4th day, Sarah Holloway responded to my message. Thank you for reaching out. Yes, I'd like to talk. Can you call me? She included her phone number. I pulled over at a rest stop and called her, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite name. She answered on the 2nd ring. Hello? Sarah, this is Sawyer Reddick. I messaged you about your brother. Yes, thank you for calling. Her voice was tired, worn down by a year of grief and uncertainty. You said you've been hearing transmissions about Grant. I have. On the CB radio, someone calling for him over and over. It's been going on for days now, maybe longer. There was a long pause, then, that's not possible. I know how it sounds, but I'm not the only one hearing it. Other drivers have mentioned it too, and people at the truck stops have been picking it up on their radios. But Grant's been missing for a year. Why would someone be calling for him now? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Can you tell me about the last time you heard from him? She took a deep breath. It was January 13th, around 8 p.m. He called me from Fort Nelson, said he was about to head north. I told him the weather was supposed to get bad, told him to wait until morning, but he said the client needed the delivery urgently, that he'd be fine. Did he call you again after that? No, that was the last time I heard his voice. She paused, and I could hear the pain in the silence. The RCMP said his last radio transmission was around 9 p.m. He reported mechanical difficulties near mile marker 863. That was it. After that, nothing. Mile marker 863. Again. Did they ever find his truck? I asked. No. They searched for weeks. Brought in helicopters, search dogs, everything. But they never found any trace of him or the truck. It's like he just vanished into thin air. What kind of mechanical difficulties did he report? They didn't say specifically, just that he mentioned having problems and was going to pull over to check it out. That's when the transmission cut off. I thought about the abandoned truck I'd seen at that exact location, the one that had disappeared by the next day, leaving no tracks, no evidence it had ever been there. Sarah, did Grant ever mention anything unusual about that route? Anything strange he'd experienced? Like what? Radio interference, weird transmissions, anything out of the ordinary? She thought about it. Not that I remember. He drove that highway all the time, said it was lonely but straightforward. Why? I'm trying to understand what happened to him. And I think there's something going on out there, something the authorities don't know about or can't explain. Do you think he's still alive? The hope in her voice was heartbreaking. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. We talked for a few more minutes. She gave me more details about Grant, about his truck, about the load he'd been carrying. Construction materials, same as what I'd been hauling on my last run north. She asked me to keep her updated, made me promise I'd be careful. After we hung up, I sat there in the truck, staring at nothing. Grant Holloway had disappeared exactly 1 year ago. And now, on the anniversary of his disappearance, transmissions were flooding the CB frequencies. Someone calling for him, someone responding. Fragments of confusion and fear. It couldn't be coincidence. I called my dispatcher. You got any loads heading to Whitehorse? When? Now. Today, as soon as possible. He was silent for a moment. Thought you wanted to avoid that route for a while. Changed my mind. I need to go back. There's a load leaving tomorrow morning. Emergency medical supplies, same as last time. Same client, same route. I'll take it. Sawyer, you sure about this? You sounded pretty shook up last time. I'm sure. Send me the details. He did, and I confirmed. Then I spent the rest of the day preparing. Checked the truck thoroughly, made sure everything was in perfect working order. Bought extra fuel cans, emergency supplies, flares, a better flashlight, extra batteries. I wasn't taking any chances this time. That night, I barely slept. Kept thinking about Grant Holloway, about what might have happened to him. Kept hearing that voice in my head, calling out in the darkness. Grant. Grant. Where are you? I left Fort Nelson at 6 o'clock a.m. The load was waiting, same warehouse as before. Same foreman with the gray beard, who looked at me with concern. You're the guy who made that run in the storm a couple weeks back. That's me. Heard you had a rough time of it. It was interesting. Well, weather's supposed to be clear tonight. Should be an easier run. I nodded and finished securing the load, but I knew the weather wasn't what I needed to worry about. By 7:30 a.m., I was on the Alaska Highway heading north. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky pink and orange. The road was clear. Traffic light. Normal conditions. Normal day. But as the miles rolled past, as I got closer to the Yukon border, I felt the tension building in my chest. I was going back to the place where I'd heard those voices, where I'd seen that ghost truck, where Grant Holloway had vanished exactly 1 year ago. I crossed into the Yukon around noon. The CB had been quiet all morning, just occasional check-ins from other drivers, but as I passed the border sign I heard it. Faint at first. barely audible under the static. Then clearer. Grant. Just the name, spoken softly, like a question. Grant. I grabbed the mic. This is a northbound truck just over the Yukon border. Who is this? No response. Just that voice repeating the name. Grant. I kept driving, my hands tight on the wheel. The voice continued, sometimes clear, sometimes fading, but always there, patient and persistent. By 2:00 p.m., I was approaching mile marker 863. My heart was pounding, my mouth dry. I slowed down, scanning the shoulder for any sign of a vehicle, but there was nothing. Just empty road and snow-covered ground. I pulled onto the shoulder exactly where I'd seen the truck before, killed the engine, and sat there, listening. The CB was still transmitting that single word over and over. Grant, Grant, Grant. I climbed out of the cab with my flashlight, even though it was still daylight. The cold was brutal, but I barely noticed. I walked along the shoulder, looking for tire tracks, looking for any evidence that a truck had been here. Nothing. The snow was undisturbed, perfect and unmarked. But I knew something had been here. I'd seen it, had walked up to it, had tried the doors. It had been real. I walked into the trees, following the same path I'd taken when I'd heard the voice calling. The forest was silent now, just the whisper of wind through branches. I pushed deeper, maybe 50 yards, until I reached the spot where the voice had seemed to originate. And I found something. Hanging from a tree branch, almost invisible against the bark, was a small metal tag, the kind truckers attach to their keychains, with their name and company information stamped on it. I pulled it down and brushed off the snow. Grant Holloway, Northland Freight, Prince George, BC. My hands were shaking as I stared at it. This was his. This had belonged to the missing driver. But how had it gotten here, 50 yards into the forest? And why was it hanging from a tree branch like someone had placed it there deliberately? I looked around, suddenly aware of how alone I was, how far from help. The trees pressed in close, their branches interlocking overhead. The sky was barely visible through the canopy. The CB in my truck crackled, loud enough that I could hear it from here. Grant, we know where you are now. I ran back to the truck, crashing through the branches, slipping in the snow. Climbed into the cab and grabbed the mic. Who is this? What do you know about Grant Holloway? The voice didn't acknowledge me. It just kept speaking, and for the first time it said something different. Grant, it's time. It's been long enough. You need to answer. Answer what? I shouted into the mic. Grant, last chance. Tell us where you are, or we're coming to find you. I felt ice in my veins. Who are you? What do you want? But the transmission cut off, leaving only static. I clicked through all the channels, trying to find that voice again. But it was gone. The radio was silent. I sat there with the keychain in my hand, looking at Grant Holloway's name stamped on the metal. I'd found evidence of him, proof that he'd been here. But I still didn't understand what had happened to him, or why, 1 year later, someone or something was still looking for him. I pulled back onto the highway and continued north, but my mind was racing. That voice on the radio, the one that had been calling for Grant, it hadn't been trying to help him. The tone was wrong. The words were wrong. It wasn't a dispatcher trying to locate a lost driver. It was something else. Something searching. Something hunting. And Grant Holloway, wherever he was, had been running from it. I drove faster, suddenly desperate to reach Whitehorse, to be around other people. The afternoon light was fading, the sun dropping toward the horizon. Soon it would be dark again, and I'd be alone on this highway with whatever lived in the spaces between radio frequencies. The CB crackled. A new voice this time, different from before. Younger, frightened. Please, anyone, I don't know where I am. I grabbed the mic. This is a northbound truck. Give me your location. What mile marker are you near? Been driving for so long. Can't find the road. What's your name? Are you Grant? The lights keep following me. What lights? Describe what you see. They want me to stop, but if you stop, what? What happens? But the voice dissolved into static, and then silence. I tried calling back, tried reaching whoever it was, but got nothing, just empty air. I looked in my mirrors, half expecting to see lights following me, but the road behind was dark and empty, just my own taillights reflecting off the snow. I made it to Whitehorse around 8 o'clock p.m. and went straight to the truck stop where Elowen worked. She was behind the counter as always, and she looked up when I came in. Sawyer, didn't expect to see you back so soon. I need to ask you something. Do you remember a driver named Grant Holloway? Her expression changed. Why? Just answer the question. Did you know him? She nodded slowly. He used to come through here regularly. Nice guy, always friendly. But he disappeared last year. They never found him. I know. I've been hearing transmissions on the radio, someone calling for him. I've heard them too, everyone has. But Sawyer... She paused, choosing her words carefully. That's not what bothers me. What do you mean? The first time I heard those transmissions was January 14th last year, the day after Grant disappeared. They called for him all night, non-stop. Then at dawn, they just stopped, completely silent. And now they're back. Exactly 1 year later. Same transmissions, same voice, same everything. I felt cold all over. What are you saying? I'm saying this has happened before, and I think it's going to happen again. I pulled out the keychain I'd found and showed it to her. I found this in the forest near mile marker 863. This was his. Elowen stared at it. How did you find that? It was hanging from a tree branch, like someone put it there on purpose, or like someone left it as a warning. We both fell silent. Around us, the truck stop continued its normal operations. Drivers coming and going, food being served, fuel being pumped. Normal life. Normal world. But I knew better now. I knew that just beyond the lights, just past the edge of civilization, something else existed. Something that called out names in the darkness, that left clues in the forest that waited for people to answer. And Grant Holloway, wherever he was, had never answered. Or maybe he had, and that was worse. I ordered coffee and sat at the counter thinking. The keychain sat in front of me, Grant's name catching the fluorescent light. Tomorrow, I'd make my delivery and head back south. Back to Port Nelson, back to safety. But I knew I couldn't leave it alone. Couldn't walk away from this mystery, from these voices, from whatever had happened to Grant Holloway. Because if I did, it might happen to someone else. It might happen to me. The CB on the counter crackled softly. Elowen and I both looked at it. For a moment, there was only static. Then faintly, Grant. We're so close now. So very close. And I realized that whatever was looking for Grant Holloway had been searching for an entire year, and it wasn't going to stop until it found him, or until it found something else instead. I stayed in Whitehorse for 2 days, made my delivery, checked into a cheap motel, spent the time trying to decide what to do next. The keychain sat on the nightstand, Grant Holloway's name staring at me every time I woke up. I'd taken it from that tree in the forest, and now it felt like a responsibility I couldn't put down. On the second night, I called Sarah again. I found something, I told her. Your brother's keychain. It was in the forest near where he disappeared. She was quiet for a long moment. How far into the forest? Maybe 50 yards from the highway, hanging from a tree branch. That doesn't make sense. Grant would never leave his keys behind. And why would he go into the forest? I don't think he left them voluntarily. What do you mean? I hesitated, trying to find the right words. Sarah, I think something happened to your brother out there. Something that can't be explained easily. I've been hearing these transmissions, these voices calling for him, and now I'm starting to understand that they're not trying to help him. They're trying to find him. Find him for what? I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. Sawyer, please be careful. I've already lost my brother. I don't want someone else getting hurt trying to help him. I'll be careful, but I need to know what happened. I need to understand. We talked for a while longer, and she told me more about Grant. How he'd loved the solitude of long-haul trucking. How he'd always said the highway was where he felt most at peace. How he'd driven the Alaska highway dozens of times without incident. Until the night he didn't come home. After we hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The motel room was quiet. Just the hum of the heating unit and the occasional sound of traffic outside. But in my mind, I kept hearing that voice on the CB. Grant. Grant. We're so close now. What were they close to? What were they looking for? The next morning, I checked out of the motel and headed back to the truck stop. Elowen was there, as always. I sat at the counter and ordered breakfast. You look terrible, she said. Haven't been sleeping well. Still thinking about Grant? I nodded. Can I ask you something? That night, he disappeared. Did you see him? Did he stop here? He did. Came in around 7:30, grabbed coffee and a sandwich. We talked for a few minutes. He seemed fine, normal. Said he was heading to Whitehorse, had a tight delivery window. Did he mention anything unusual? Anything about the radio, or seeing strange things on the road? She thought about it. Not that I remember. But there was one thing that struck me as odd. When he was leaving, he looked out at the parking lot and just stood there for a minute, like he was seeing something. I asked if he was okay, and he said, yeah, just tired. But the look on his face... She trailed off. What kind of look? Like he was afraid of something, or like he was recognizing something he'd been dreading. I felt a chill run through me. Did you ask him about it? I tried, but he just smiled and said he was fine. Then he left. That was the last time anyone saw him. I finished my breakfast and paid. Before I left, I asked Elowen one more question. If you could tell Grant one thing right now, what would it be? She didn't hesitate. I'd tell him not to answer. Whatever's calling for him, don't answer it. Why? Because that's what they want. They want him to respond, to acknowledge them, and once he does, they'll have what they need. What do they need? I don't know, but I think Grant figured it out, and that's why he never answered. I left the truck stop and climbed into my rig. I had a return load waiting in Whitehorse, machine parts heading back to Fort Nelson. Standard run, easy money. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I made a decision. I was going to stop at mile marker 863 one more time. I was going to go into that forest and look for more evidence, more clues about what had happened to Grant. The drive south was uneventful at first. Clear roads, good visibility, no traffic. But as I approached the Yukon-BC border, the CB started crackling again. Grant. Just the name, soft and persistent. Grant. We know you're listening. I grabbed the mic. He's not listening. He's gone. Whatever you're looking for, you're not going to find it. The voice didn't respond to me. It never did. It just kept calling. Grant, it's time to come home. Where's home? I asked, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. What are you? Grant, we've been waiting so long. I clicked through the channels, trying to find a clear frequency. but every one was contaminated with that voice. Soft, patient, relentless. On Channel 9, I heard something else. That other voice, the frightened one. I can see them now. I grabbed the mic. See who? What do you see? They're all around, in the trees. Where are you? Give me your location. I think they've been here the whole time. Waiting. Waiting for what? But the voice cut off, replaced by static. I tried calling back but got nothing. Just that original voice still calling for Grant. I reached mile marker 863 around 3 o'clock p.m. The sun was already low, the light taking on that blue quality it gets in winter afternoons. I pulled onto the shoulder in the exact spot where I'd stopped before, where I'd seen the ghost truck, where I'd found the keychain. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The cold was intense, sharp enough to make my eyes water. I walked to the edge of the trees and stood there for a moment, psyching myself up to go back in. The forest looked different in daylight. Less threatening, more ordinary. Just spruce and pine, their branches heavy with snow. But I remembered how it had felt in the darkness. How the voice had called from inside. How I'd found nothing when I'd reached the source. I pushed into the trees, following the same path as before. The snow was deeper here, undisturbed except for my own tracks from a few days ago. I could see where I'd stumbled, where I'd run back toward the truck. The prints led straight to the tree where I'd found the keychain. I stood there looking up at the branch. The keychain was gone, of course. I had it in my pocket. But there was something else now, something I hadn't noticed before. Scratches on the tree bark, like someone had carved into it with a knife or a sharp rock. I brushed away the snow and ice that had accumulated, and the scratches became clearer. They weren't random, they were words. Don't answer. My hands were shaking as I traced the letters. This was a message, a warning. Grant had been here, had left this behind. But when? How? I looked around the clearing, really seeing it for the first time. There were more trees with marks on them. I went to the nearest one and brushed away the snow. They're not real. Another tree. Don't believe the lights. Another? Keep driving. I stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by these messages, these warnings carved into bark. Grant had been here. He'd survived long enough to leave these signs. But what had happened after that? The CB in my truck crackled, loud enough that I could hear it from here. Grant, we found your messages. I ran back to the truck, my heart pounding, climbed into the cab and grabbed the mic. What do you want with him? Grant, your messages won't help. They never do. Answer me. What are you? The voice changed, became layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. We are the road, Grant. We are the darkness between the lights. We are what waits when you're alone. I felt ice in my veins. You're not real. You're just interference, just signals crossing. Is that what you tell yourself, Sawyer? It knew my name. We know all the names, Grant, Sawyer. Everyone who drives these roads alone. Everyone who listens too long to the silence. I sat there frozen, the mic in my hand, unable to speak. Grant tried to ignore us, tried to keep driving, tried to pretend we weren't there, but eventually everyone answers. Eventually everyone stops. What happens when they stop? Would you like to find out? I slammed the mic back onto its hook and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The truck roared to life, and I threw it into gear, pulling back onto the highway faster than was safe. In the mirror, I saw something, just for a second. A figure standing at the edge of the trees, right where I'd been moments before. Tall and dark, barely visible against the forest. watching me leave. I pushed the accelerator down, the truck picking up speed. 60, 70, 80. Too fast for these conditions, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from that place, needed to put distance between myself and whatever I'd seen. The CB was silent now. No voices, no static, just dead air. I drove for an hour before I started to calm down, before my hands stopped shaking enough to ease off the gas. The sun was setting, painting the sky red and purple. In an hour it would be full dark, and I'd be alone on this highway again. But I wasn't alone, was I? Something was out here with me, something that knew my name, that had been watching Grant, that lived in the spaces between radio stations. My phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my seat. It was Sarah. "Sawyer? Are you okay? You sound out of breath." "I'm fine, just had a moment. Did you find anything else?" I thought about telling her, about the messages carved in the trees, about the voice that had spoken my name, about the figure I'd seen. But what would that accomplish? It would just give her more questions, more pain. "I found some evidence that Grant survived for a while after his truck broke down," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He left signs, warnings. I think he was trying to help anyone else who might get lost in the same area." "What kind of warnings?" "Just advice about staying safe, keeping moving, not stopping for anything." She was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like Grant. Always trying to help, even when he was in trouble himself." We talked for a few more minutes, but I was distracted, checking the mirrors constantly, watching for any sign of lights behind me. Eventually, I told her I needed to focus on the road, and we said goodbye. Night fell, and the highway became a tunnel of darkness with my headlights carving out a small bubble of visibility. I passed through familiar landmarks: the bridge over the Rancheria River, the turnoff for Teslin Lake, each one taking me further south, further from that clearing with its carved warnings. Around 9 p.m., the CB crackled back to life. "Sawyer," my name, clear and distinct. No static, no interference. "Sawyer, you found his messages. Leave me alone. We can't do that. You're involved now. You've seen too much, heard too much. You're part of this story." "I'm not part of anything. I'm just a driver trying to make a living." That's what Grant said, too. But once you hear us, once you acknowledge us, you're connected, you're linked. I switched off the CB radio, just reached over and clicked the power button. The crackling stopped, leaving only the hum of the engine and the whisper of tires on pavement. But I could still hear it. Faint, like it was coming from far away, but unmistakable. That voice calling my name now instead of Grant's. "Sawyer, Sawyer, where are you going, Sawyer?" I turned on the truck's sound system, cranked the music up loud, trying to drown out the voice. But it cut through the noise, persistent and clear. "Sawyer, you can't run from us. We're already inside." Inside what? Inside my head? Inside the truck? I drove faster, pushing the rig as hard as I dared on the icy roads. The trailer swayed behind me, the load shifting slightly. I eased off the gas, not wanting to lose control. "Sawyer, Grant tried to run too. He drove for hours, drove until his fuel ran out. And then he had no choice but to stop. I have plenty of fuel." "Do you?" I looked at the gauge. Half a tank. More than enough to reach Fort Nelson. But even as I watched, the needle seemed to drop. Quarter tank. Then less. I blinked, looked again. Half tank. The same as before. My eyes were playing tricks on me, my mind filling in fears. "Your eyes aren't playing tricks, Sawyer. We can affect things, small things at first. Fuel gauges, radio signals, tire pressure. As if on cue, the low tire pressure warning light came on. I glanced at the dash, saw the indicator showing the left rear trailer tire was losing air. You did that. We did, and we can do more. But we don't want to hurt you, Sawyer. We just want you to stop. We want you to answer when we call. That's all Grant had to do. Just answer. Just acknowledge us. And then what? What happens after that? Then you become part of the road, part of the darkness, part of us. I understood now. Grant hadn't disappeared because he'd crashed or frozen. He'd disappeared because he'd answered, because he'd acknowledged whatever this was, and it had taken him, absorbed him, made him part of itself. And now it wanted me. I'm not going to answer, I said out loud to myself, to whatever was listening. I'm going to keep driving, and I'm going to forget any of this happened. That's what Grant said, word for word. But here's the thing about these roads, Sawyer. Eventually, you have to stop. Eventually, you have to sleep. And when you do, we'll be waiting. The low tire pressure light blinked off. The fuel gauge climbed back to half. The voice faded, becoming quieter, more distant. We'll be waiting, Sawyer. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. Doesn't matter. We have all the time in the world. And you have to keep driving these roads. It's your job. It's who you are. Then silence. Real silence this time. The CB stayed quiet. The engine hummed its normal rhythm. Everything was ordinary again, but I knew better. I knew that whatever had spoken to me was right. I couldn't avoid these roads forever. This was my livelihood, my career, and eventually I'd be back here, alone in the darkness, trying to make a delivery. And it would be waiting. I reached Port Nelson around 2 o'clock a.m., went straight to my apartment, parked the truck, and went inside. I didn't shower, didn't eat, just locked the door and sat on the couch with all the lights on. Grant's keychain sat on the coffee table in front of me. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. Such a simple thing, a piece of metal with a name stamped on it. But it represented something bigger, a warning. Evidence that I wasn't crazy, that what I'd experienced was real. I thought about calling Sarah again, telling her what I'd learned. But what would I say? That her brother had been taken by something living in the radio frequencies? That he'd carved warnings in trees, trying to help anyone else who might hear the voices? She'd think I was insane. Maybe I was. I dozed off eventually, sitting upright on the couch, the lights still blazing. When I woke, it was mid-morning and my phone was ringing. My dispatcher. You got another load? When? Tonight. Urgent delivery to Whitehorse. Same client as before. They're asking for you specifically. Why me? Said you were reliable. Made the last delivery despite bad conditions. They want someone they can count on. I thought about saying no, about quitting this job, finding something else, staying away from the Alaska Highway forever. But then I thought about Grant, about how he'd tried to warn others, had left messages in the forest, had fought against whatever had taken him. He'd been brave. He'd tried to help. Could I do less? I'll take it, I said. You sure? You sound rough. I'm sure. Send me the details. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, looking at Grant's keychain. Then I attached it to my own keyring, right next to my truck keys. A reminder, a talisman, a promise that I wouldn't forget him, wouldn't let his disappearance be meaningless. That night, I loaded up and headed north again. The highway was clear, the weather calm. Normal conditions, normal run. But as I crossed into the Yukon, as the darkness closed in around me, I heard it again. Soft at first, then clearer. Sawyer, you came back. I'm not answering, I said quietly. You can call all you want, but I'm not answering. We'll see. Grant said that too. But he was alone out here just like you, and loneliness does things to people. Makes them crave connection, even with things they know they should avoid. I drove on in silence, refusing to respond, refusing to engage. The voice continued for a while, sometimes calling my name, sometimes talking about Grant, sometimes just making observations about the darkness, the cold, the emptiness of these roads. Eventually, it faded. But I knew it would be back. Tomorrow, next week, next month. Every time I drove this highway, it would be there. Waiting, calling, patient. I passed mile marker 863 without stopping. Didn't even slow down. Just kept my eyes forward, my hands on the wheel, my mind focused on the road ahead. In my peripheral vision, I thought I saw something standing at the tree line. A tall figure, dark against the snow. Watching, but I didn't look directly at it. Didn't acknowledge it. Just kept driving. Because that's what you do. You keep moving. You keep your wheels rolling. You don't stop, don't answer, don't engage with the things that call to you from the darkness. You just drive. And if sometimes you hear voices on the radio that shouldn't be there, if sometimes you see things at the edge of your headlights that disappear when you look directly at them, if sometimes you feel like you're being followed by something that exists in the gaps between here and there, well, that's just part of the job. Part of being a long-haul trucker on the loneliest roads in North America. You learn to live with it. You learn to ignore it. You learn that some questions don't have answers, and some disappearances don't have explanations. You learn that the road takes what it wants, when it wants, and all you can do is keep driving, keep moving, keep refusing to stop. I made it to Whitehorse without incident, dropped my load, picked up a return shipment, headed back south. The voices were quieter this time, less persistent, like they were giving me space, letting me think I'd won. But I knew better. I knew this wasn't over. It would never be over. Because Grant Holloway was still out there somewhere. Not alive, probably not dead either. Just there. Part of the road, part of the darkness, part of whatever it was that called to drivers in the night. And every time I drove past mile marker 863, every time I heard that voice on the CB, I'd remember him. I'd remember his warnings carved in bark. I'd remember his sister's hope that somehow, someday, he'd come home. But he wouldn't. I knew that now. He'd answered when he shouldn't have. He'd stopped when he should have kept driving. And now he was part of the road, part of the story that truckers tell each other in truck stops and rest areas. The story of the voice that calls your name. The story of the thing that waits in the darkness. The story of what happens when you're alone too long on roads that go nowhere and everywhere at once. I still drive the Alaska Highway. Still make runs to Whitehorse and beyond. Still hear the voices sometimes, calling out names I don't recognize. Other drivers, maybe. Other people who've heard too much, seen too much, stayed out too long in the cold and the dark. And sometimes, on particularly quiet nights when I'm the only vehicle on the road for miles, I hear my own name. Sawyer. Just that. Nothing more. Just my name spoken softly, like a question or an invitation. And I don't answer. I never answer. I just keep driving, keep moving, keep my eyes forward and my hands on the wheel. Because the moment you answer, the moment you acknowledge that voice, you're giving it permission. You're saying yes to something you don't understand, agreeing to terms you haven't read. And then you become like Grant. Another name on the list, another voice in the darkness. Another warning carved in a tree for the next driver to find. So I don't answer. And I won't answer. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder if Grant wishes he'd done the same. I wonder if he's still out there, still driving in some way I can't comprehend, still trying to ignore the voices that called his name until he couldn't ignore them anymore. And I wonder if someday, despite all my precautions, despite all my refusals, I'll find myself standing at the edge of those trees, looking back at my truck, knowing I've finally stopped for the last time. The road is patient. It has all the time in the world. And eventually, one way or another, everyone answers. But not today. Not tonight. Not while I still have fuel in my tank and miles to make and reasons to keep moving. Today, I just drive. And tomorrow, I'll drive again. That's all any of us can do. Keep driving and hope it's enough.